The soup kitchen smelled like desperation and burnt coffee. 6 in the morning, most of Austin still sleeping. But the line outside the Salvation Army stretched around the block. Men with hollow eyes, women with children who looked too old for their ages, the kind of people the world had decided to stop seeing. Cole Brennan stood behind the serving counter, wearing an apron over his leather vest. 6'3", arms covered in tattoos that told stories he'd never speak out loud. Skull and crossbones, names of brothers who died, dates that meant something only to him. His hands, scarred knuckles, faded ink between fingers that spelled words in languages most people wouldn't recognize. Those hands ladled soup into paper bowls with surprising gentleness. A little boy, maybe 7, stood in front of him with eyes that reminded Cole of mirrors, the kind that showed you things you'd spent decades trying to forget. "Extra crackers," the boy said, voice barely above whisper. Cole filled the bowl higher than regulations allowed, added 4 packets of crackers instead of 2. The boy's eyes widened, like he'd just witnessed magic, like kindness was something he'd stopped expecting from men who looked like walking violence. "Thank you, mister." The boy moved on. Cole watched him sit with his mother at a corner table, watched her break her own crackers in half to give him more, watched her pretend she wasn't hungry so he could eat. He'd been that boy once. Different city, different decade. Same hunger that had nothing to do with empty stomachs and everything to do with empty spaces where families were supposed to be. "Hey, Reaper," a voice called from the kitchen. "You gonna stand there all day, or you gonna help with the dishes?" Cole turned, smiled slightly. The smile didn't reach his eyes. Never did. He'd forgotten how to make it go that far. The flashback hit him while his hands were in dishwater. They always did. Like his brain had scheduled appointments for trauma and refused to cancel them no matter how many years passed. He was 8 years old, standing in a gas station parking lot, middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, his father's truck idling next to him, the kind of truck that smelled like cigarettes and broken promises. That truck had been more home than any house they'd ever rented. His father handed him a crumpled $10 bill. "Go inside, get yourself something to eat. I'll be right back." Cole had believed him because 8-year-olds believed in things like fathers coming back, in things like tomorrow meaning something good, in things like love being stronger than whatever was in the bottle his father kept under the driver's seat. He'd gone inside, bought a candy bar and a soda, came back out to find the parking spot empty, just oil stains on concrete and the sound of wind through chain link fence. Just the crushing weight of understanding that right back didn't mean what he thought it meant. The gas station attendant had found him 3 hours later, still standing in that empty spot, still holding his candy bar, still waiting. The police came, asked questions he didn't have answers for. They'd found a note in the trash can, 5 words written on a napkin in his father's handwriting. "You're better off without me. 20 years of foster homes, some okay, most not. Families who took in broken kids for the monthly check. Houses where you learned to sleep light and fight dirty. Where you learned that being invisible was safer than being seen. Where you learned that the only people you could trust were the ones who'd been broken the same way you had." He joined the Iron Brotherhood at 21, not because he believed in anything, but because they'd offered him something nobody else had: a room, a purpose. Brothers who looked just as dangerous as he did. Brothers who'd been thrown away by people who were supposed to love them. Brothers who understood that family wasn't blood. It was choice, daily choice, showing up, keeping promises, standing when everyone else ran. "Reaper," the voice again. "You good?" Cole blinked. The dishwater had gone cold. His hands were still moving. Washing the same bowl for the 3rd time. Muscle memory taking over when his mind went somewhere else. "Yeah," he said, voice rough, like gravel in a cement mixer. "I'm good." He wasn't. But you didn't tell people that. Not when your reputation was built on being the one who handled things. Not when you were sergeant at arms for an outlaw motorcycle club. Not when your job was to be the wall between your brothers and the world that wanted to destroy them. He finished the dishes, hung up his apron, walked out into Austin morning sunlight that felt too bright for how heavy everything seemed. His Harley sat in the parking lot, black paint, chrome that caught light like knives. The kind of bike that made people nervous when it pulled up behind them at red lights. The Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse was 40 minutes south, off Highway 47. The kind of place where cops didn't go unless they were ready for war. Where the Texas heat made everything shimmer like mirage. Where men who'd been labeled unredeemable by society built something that looked like family if you squinted hard enough. Cole rode with the morning traffic. 18-wheelers hauling goods. Soccer moms in SUVs. Normal people living normal lives. People who'd never had to choose between eating and paying rent. People who'd never been left in parking lots by the one person who was supposed to keep them safe. He hated them sometimes, not for what they had, but for not knowing how lucky they were, for complaining about minor inconveniences while people lined up at soup kitchens, for seeing men like him and assuming the worst, for being right about the assumptions more often than they were wrong. The clubhouse was alive with noise by the time he arrived. Motorcycles everywhere, brothers working on bikes, music playing, the smell of motor oil and cigarettes, and the kind of coffee that tasted like regret but did its job. Bull was working on his Harley near the garage. Thomas Garrett, 58 years old, vice president of the Iron Brotherhood, gray beard down to his chest, arms that looked like they'd been carved from oak trees, tattoos that had faded into abstract art after decades of sun and poor decisions. Morning Reaper, Bull said without looking up. You smell like soup. Volunteer shift. Bull grunted. Still doing that, huh? Cole didn't answer. They'd had this conversation before. Bull thought it was weakness. Thought outlaw bikers shouldn't be serving food to homeless people. Thought it muddied the waters of who they were supposed to be. Cole thought Bull could think whatever he wanted as long as he kept it to himself. How's the bike? Same as yesterday. Needs a part I can't afford. Life of luxury. Bull's hands kept moving. Precise. Careful. Like the motorcycle was something precious. Like it mattered more than it probably did. Cole understood. Sometimes the only thing you could control was whether the machine in front of you ran right. Everything else was chaos. Heading out, Cole said. Need to clear my head. Bull looked up then, eyes that had seen too much, that held the weight of things he never talked about, things that woke him up at 3 a.m., things that made him volunteer for the dangerous jobs because living scared him more than dying did. You okay, brother? Cole almost laughed. No, none of them were okay. You didn't end up in an outlaw motorcycle club because life had been kind. You ended up there because kindness was a luxury you couldn't afford. Because the world had shown you its teeth and you decided to grow your own. Always. Bull held his gaze for 3 seconds, then nodded. Went back to his bike. That was brotherhood. Knowing when to push. Knowing when to let people carry their weight alone. Knowing that sometimes the best help you could offer was the silence that said, I'm here when you're ready. Cole got back on his Harley, headed south on Highway 47. No destination, just movement. Just the wind and the road and the kind of solitude that felt like meditation if you were generous. Felt like running if you were honest. He stopped at a gas station 30 miles south. The Chevron on the edge of nowhere. The kind of place where truckers grabbed coffee. Where bikers filled tanks before long rides. Where people who didn't belong anywhere else found themselves at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. The gas station looked exactly like the one from his memory. Different state, different decade. Same layout. Same worn concrete. Same chain link fence rattling in the wind. Same feeling that this place existed outside of time. Outside of anywhere that mattered. Cole pulled up to pump 7. Cut the engine. The silence hit different without the motorcycle noise. Made room for thoughts he'd been out running for 40 miles. Thoughts about 8-year-old boys. About fathers who left. About promises that meant nothing when they came from mouths that tasted like whiskey. He started filling the tank. The numbers on the pump rolled over. Cents becoming dollars, becoming the price you paid for forward motion. For getting away from wherever here was. That's when he heard the scream. High-pitched. Terrified. The kind that made your spine straighten. That made 20 years of bad decisions and worse choices sharpen into something focused. Something dangerous. Something useful. The scream came from inside the convenience store. Through windows covered in ads for beer and lottery tickets and beef jerky. through doors that had seen thousands of people pass through and probably remembered none of them. Cole's hand moved to the pump, pulled the nozzle out, gasoline still flowing, dripping onto concrete. He didn't care, was already moving toward the store. Leather vest marking him as Iron Brotherhood. Patches that said Sergeant at Arms and Reaper in Detroit, chapter before he'd transferred south. Patches that made cops nervous and criminals think twice. But before he reached the door, it burst open. A little girl running full speed, looking over her shoulder. Eyes wide with terror that no 6-year-old should understand. Blonde hair and pigtails, face streaked with tears, small hands pumping, legs working hard, running like her life depended on speed. She was running straight toward him. Cole stopped, hands up slightly, the universal gesture for I'm not a threat. But he was, to everyone. That was his job. That was his reputation. That was the armor he'd built from scars and bad choices, and decades of being the kind of man mothers pulled their children away from. But this little girl wasn't pulling away. She was running toward him like he was salvation instead of damnation. Like his leather and tattoos and general aura of do not approach meant something different than what the world assumed. Please, she gasped, out of breath, face flushed. Please act like you're my dad. The words hit Cole like buckshot. Gathered impact. Every pellet finding something vital. Act like you're my dad. Act like. Because she knew he wasn't. Knew this was pretend. But needed the pretend so badly she'd picked him. This girl who was maybe 6 years old. Who could have run to the soccer mom at pump 3. Could have run to the elderly couple at pump 5. Could have run to literally anyone who didn't look like they'd just escaped from Central Casting's motorcycle gang extras department. She'd picked him. Picked. Her small hands grabbed his, both of hers wrapped around his left hand, holding tight, like he was anchor, like he was shore, like he was the thing that would keep her from drowning. Cole's brain went into that mode, the one where everything slowed down, where you saw details that mattered and discarded ones that didn't, where 20 years of dangerous living taught you to read situations in the time it took normal people to blink. The girl was terrified, not crying wolf terrified, not wanting attention terrified, real terror, the kind that came from knowing something bad was happening, the kind that made you trust strangers because strangers were better than the monster behind you. Her clothes were nice, clean, the kind parents who cared bought, not rich, but loved. That mattered. Meant she wasn't running from home. Meant something else was wrong. Her grip was desperate, painful. Little fingers digging into his hand with strength that came from adrenaline, from survival instinct, from the part of the brain that predated language and said run or die. Cole looked up. Through the convenience store door, a man was coming out. 30s, jeans and a polo shirt, looking completely ordinary. The kind of guy you'd see at parent-teacher conferences, at Little League games, at grocery stores loading up the family SUV. Except his eyes. His eyes were scanning, searching, cold, calculating. The eyes of someone who'd lost something valuable and was determining options. The eyes of a predator who just watched his prey escape. Those eyes landed on Cole and the girl, narrowed, did math, weighed odds. The girl pressed herself behind Cole's legs, trembling. Her voice came out as whisper, as confession, as plea. He's not my dad, she said. He took me from the playground. Please don't let him take me. Cole didn't need to hear another word, didn't need proof, didn't need verification. 20 years of reading people in situations where reading them wrong got you killed. 20 years of trusting gut instinct, because gut instinct was the thing that kept you breathing when logic failed. This man was wrong. Everything about him screamed predator wearing prey's clothing, screamed danger in a polo shirt, screamed the kind of monster who looked normal until you were close enough to see the truth. Cole stepped forward, put himself between the girl and the man, his massive body creating wall, his presence filling space, his reputation preceding him in ways that made the man stop walking, made him recalculate. The girl's grip on his hand tightened. Cole squeezed back once, gentle. The gesture saying, I've got you without words. Because words weren't always what scared children needed. Sometimes they just needed to know someone was standing between them and the dark. The man put on a smile, The kind that didn't reach his eyes, that looked practiced. That looked like something he'd used successfully before. That assumed Cole was someone who'd believe performance over instinct. "Emily," he said, voice pitched friendly, voice pitched reasonable, voice pitched like concerned relative. "Sweetheart, you scared me. Come here." The girl's trembling got worse, like hearing him say her name was confirmation of nightmare, like the sound of his voice was trigger for trauma. Cole's voice came out low, dangerous. The voice that came from the part of him that had survived foster homes and street fights and outlaw wars. The voice that said, "I am not someone you want to test. She doesn't want to go with you." The man's smile stayed fixed. Plastic. The kind that said, "I'm being patient with an inconvenient situation. I'm her uncle. She's just upset because I wouldn't buy her candy. You know how kids are." Everything about the statement was wrong. The delivery too smooth, the explanation too ready. The assumption that Cole was someone who'd accept surface and ignore substance. Cole looked down at the girl. She was staring at the ground, shaking, small body radiating fear like heat. "Is this your uncle?" The question came out quiet, not accusatory, just gathering information, just confirming what he already knew. "No," the girl whispered. "I've never seen him before today." The man's face changed, smile dropping, mask cracking. The friendly uncle routine abandoned for something colder, something honest, something that confirmed every instinct Cole's gut had been screaming. "Listen, buddy." The man's voice went hard. "This doesn't concern you. Emily, come here right now." Cole pulled out his phone with his free hand, never taking his eyes off the man, never giving him opening, never breaking the wall he'd become between predator and prey. "Then you won't mind if I call the police and let them sort this out?" That's when the man's hand moved to his jacket pocket, fast, instinctive. The movement of someone reaching for something, for weapon or phone or evidence, for whatever came next when Plan A failed. Cole's body responded before his mind caught up. 20 years of bar fights and club wars, 20 years of situations where hesitation meant hospital or morgue, 20 years of muscle memory that said, "Move now, think later." He stepped forward, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted hard, not enough to break, just enough to hurt, just enough to stop the reaching, just enough to make very clear that this situation had shifted, that the balance of power was no longer in the predator's favor. The man yelped. Something fell from his pocket. Not a weapon, not keys, a phone. It hit the concrete, screen facing up, unlocked. For exactly 2 seconds before the screen went dark, Cole saw a text message conversation, saw words that made his blood run cold, that made 20 years of dangerous living seem like preparation for this exact moment. Target acquired. Blonde 6F. Delivery in 2 hours. Location, Warehouse 7. Delivery. Like the girl was package. Like childhood was commodity. Like innocence was something you could buy and sell to the highest bidder. Cole's vision went red. The kind of rage that was quiet, that was focused. That was more dangerous than shouting because it came from the place where morality ended and action began. In the motorcycle club world, there were lines. Rules even outlaws followed. Things you didn't do no matter how far outside society you'd placed yourself. And hurting kids was the one thing that would unite every club in the country against you. The one thing that made enemies into allies. The one thing that meant war. Cole kept his grip on the man's wrist. His other hand dilate. Not the police, not yet. Called someone who could move faster. Someone who'd understand immediately. Someone who'd drop everything and arrive ready for whatever came next. "Bull, it's Reaper. I need the crew at the Chevron on Highway 47 now." The voice on the other end, Bull's gravelly tone. "What's the situation?" "Child trafficking. And I need it handled before this piece of garbage makes a phone call." The line went quiet, not empty quiet, dangerous quiet, the quiet before violence. The quiet that said message received and understood. 5 minutes, Bull said. The line went dead. The man tried to pull away. Cole's grip tightened, bones grinding together, the message clear without words. "You move again, I break it. Understand." The girl was crying quietly behind him, Small sobs that sounded like relief mixed with terror. The sound of someone who'd been so scared for so long that safety felt like dream, like something that might evaporate if you acknowledged it too loudly. Cole softened his voice, kept his eyes on the man, kept his grip firm, but spoke to the girl like she mattered, like she was person instead of object. Like her fear was valid and her choice to run had been brave, and her instinct to ask for help had been right. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your real name?" The girl sniffled. "Greer. Greer Sullivan." "Okay, Greer, I'm Cole. And I promise you, this man will never hurt you or anyone else ever again." The roar of motorcycles filled the air within 5 minutes, like thunder rolling across flat Texas landscape, like promise being kept, like brotherhood meaning something more than word on a patch. 7 Harleys pulled into the gas station, riding formation, moving together like single organism. Men who looked like they'd stepped out of nightmare. Leather patches, scars that told stories, tattoos that marked them as outside, as other, as the kind of people civilized society had decided were irredeemable. But Greer didn't seem scared. Maybe because Cole was still holding her hand. Maybe because 6-year-olds had better instinct than adults about who was actually dangerous to them. Maybe because she could tell the difference between men who looked dangerous and men who were dangerous to her. Bull got off his bike first, took one look at the situation, at Cole's grip on the man's wrist, at Greer hiding behind Cole, at the phone on the ground. His face went from curious to murderous in half a second. "This what I think it is." "Check the phone." Bull picked it up, scrolled. His jaw tightened, veins standing out on his neck. His hands started shaking. Not from fear, from rage being barely contained, from the thing inside him that wanted violence but was choosing control because the situation demanded it. He handed the phone to another member. Silas Thorne, wire to the brothers. 28 years old but looked younger, babyface. The kind of guy who got carded buying lottery tickets. But his eyes were old, the eyes of someone who'd seen system fail from the inside. Foster kid who'd aged out. Who'd learned that the only people who'd protect him were the ones wearing patches that said they'd chosen each other over everything else. Wire was their tech specialist, could hack things that were supposed to be unhackable, could trace things that were supposed to be untraceable, could find digital footprints that people thought they'd erased. How many? Bull's voice came out choked. How many kids? Wire scrolled, face getting paler with each swipe. At least 15 in the last 8 months based on these messages. He's part of a network. There's a meeting spot, a handler, buyers. The word buyers hung in the air like poison, like confirmation of worse fears, like evidence that the world was exactly as dark as you feared it was when you couldn't sleep at 3 in the morning. The man Cole was holding started to speak, started to form words that would be explanation or plea or threat. Cole shoved him against his own truck. Not hard enough to injure, just hard enough to make very clear that speaking was not currently an option, that this situation was beyond negotiation, that mercy was not on the table. "You're right, I don't understand." Cole's voice went quiet, the dangerous quiet. "I don't understand how something like you exists, but I'm going to make sure it stops existing real soon." "Cole," Bull's voice carried a warning, "we do this right, we get all of them." Cole knew what that meant. In his younger days, he would have just handled this in the parking lot, would have made the man disappear in ways that made families stop asking questions, would have solved the immediate problem and moved on. But Bull was right. This wasn't about revenge, wasn't about satisfying the rage burning through Cole's veins like gasoline looking for match. This was about making sure every single person in this network faced justice, real justice, the kind that meant they'd never hurt another child. "Wire. Can you access his messages? Find out where this meeting is. Already on it." Wire's fingers moved across the phone screen. Patterns only he could see. Already on it. Looks like an abandoned warehouse district. South side of Austin. 2 hours from now. Just like the message said. Cole knelt down to Greer's level. She was still crying, but quieter now. The kind of crying that came after the adrenaline wore off. After your body realized you were safe and decided it was okay to fall apart. "Greer, I need to ask you some very important questions. Can you be brave for me?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with small fists. "Did this man hurt you?" No, her voice was small. He said he was a friend of my mommy's. He said she was in an accident, and he needed to take me to the hospital. But when we got in his car, he locked the doors and drove away. I only got away when he stopped for gas. Smart kid, brave kid. She'd saved herself by running, by trusting instinct, by asking for help from someone who looked nothing like safety, but turned out to be exactly that. You know your mommy's phone number. Greer recited it perfectly. Every digit clear. The way children memorized important things. The way survival sometimes depended on knowing who to call. Cole dialed. A woman answered on the first ring, voice desperate. The kind of desperate that came from hours of not knowing. Hours of worst-case scenarios playing on loop. Hours of dying inside while pretending to function. Hello, Mrs. Sullivan, this is Cole Brennan. I'm at a gas station on Highway 47. I have your daughter Greer. She's safe. The sound of sobbing came through the phone. Loud, uncontrolled. The sound of a mother who'd been holding everything together and could finally break. The sound of relief so intense it hurt. Oh God, oh thank God. We've been looking everywhere. The police said we had to wait 24 hours, but I knew something was wrong. I knew. Ma'am, the man who took her is in custody, but I need you to call Detective Reese Hayes at the state police. Tell her Cole Brennan from the Iron Brotherhood is requesting her presence at this location. She'll understand. There was a pause. The motorcycle club. Yes, ma'am, I know our reputation, but right now we're the good guys. Cole could hear the woman's breath catching. The decision being made. Trust the outlaw bikers or keep searching alone. Trust the men society had labeled dangerous or believe the system that had told her to wait 24 hours while her daughter was missing. Okay, the woman said. Okay, I'll call her. And Mr. Brennan, thank you so much. Just keep your daughter safe. We'll handle the rest. Detective Reese Hayes arrived 40 minutes later, 3 state police units with her. She was a woman in her 40s, professional bearing, eyes that had seen enough horror to recognize it when it stood in front of her, had worked gang task forces, had spent 15 years learning that the world was more complicated than good guys and bad guys, that sometimes the people who looked dangerous were the ones who'd risk everything to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. She stepped out of her vehicle, took in the scene. 7 bikers surrounding one man, little girl holding Cole's hand, phone with evidence sitting on hood of police car where Wire had placed it. Reaper, she said. Your message said child trafficking. Cole handed her the phone. Everything you need is on here. Meeting location, network, contacts, records going back months. He grabbed Greer from the playground 3 hours ago. Hayes scrolled through the phone, her face growing darker with each message, each confirmation that the worst of humanity was alive and well and operating in her jurisdiction, that children were being stolen, that innocence was being bought and sold, that monsters wore polo shirts and drove normal cars and looked like anyone else. This is enough for warrants on at least 8 people, she looked up at Cole. How did you? She asked me to act like her dad, Cole said simply. Kids got good instincts. Greer's mother arrived moments later. Bryn Sullivan, 32 years old, blonde hair like her daughter. Face that had been pretty before stress and single parenting and working 3 jobs had carved lines into it. She was out of her car before it fully stopped. Running, calling her daughter's name. Mommy. Greer let go of Cole's hand, ran to her mother. They collided, fell to their knees holding each other, both crying, both alive, both safe. Cole watched, something cracking in his chest, the thing he'd built from scar tissue and bad decisions. The thing that said caring was weakness, that said love was liability, that said the only way to survive was to stop feeling things that hurt. But watching this reunion hurt in the way that meant something real, something that mattered, something that said maybe all the darkness was worth it if this was what light looked like. Bryn Sullivan stood up slowly, Greer attached to her hip, the way 6-year-olds attach to parents after nightmare, the way fear made you hold tighter to the things you almost lost. She approached Cole, tears streaming down her face, looking at him like he was miracle instead of man, like leather and tattoos and reputation meant nothing compared to what he'd done. Thank you, her voice broke. I don't know how to thank you. I don't care what anyone says about motorcycle clubs. You saved my baby. Cole nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude, with being seen as hero, with having someone look at him like he was worth something more than the weight of his mistakes. Just keep her safe. Greer turned back, still in her mother's arms, looking at Cole with eyes that held something he couldn't name, something that looked like trust, like faith, like the beginning of belief that maybe grown-ups could be safe. Thank you, Cole. You saved me. You saved yourself, kid, Cole said, voice rough. You were smart and brave. I just helped a little. But Greer was already digging in her pocket, pulling out a crayon, a scrap of paper, drawing something with intense focus, the way children did when they were trying to capture something important, something that needed recording, something that needed to exist outside of memory. She finished, held it out to Cole. It was picture. Cole on his motorcycle, wings drawn on his vest, making him look like angel instead of outlaw, making him look like protector instead of threat, making him look like what she'd seen instead of what the world assumed. That's you, she said, the scary biker who saved me, except you're not scary at all. Cole took the drawing, folded it carefully, put it in his vest pocket, over his heart, where it would stay, where he could carry proof that sometimes broken men did unbroken things, that sometimes the worst of us managed to be best of us when it mattered most. Hayes was organizing, making calls, coordinating. She pulled Cole aside, away from the mothers and children in moment of relief. We're going to need statements from all of you. You'll get them. But Hayes, I want in on the raid. Absolutely not. This is a police operation. Those men are expecting one person at that meeting. Cole let the sentence hang. If nobody shows, they'll scatter. But if someone shows, you're talking about going undercover, Hayes said. That's insane. I've done insane before, and unlike your undercover cops, if something goes wrong, I know how to handle myself. Bull stepped forward. He's not going alone. We all go. The Brotherhood has reputation. Nobody's going to question bikers showing up to a shady meeting. Hayes looked between them, wrestling with legal implications, with practical reality, with the fact that sometimes you had to work with people outside the system because the system moved too slow, because children didn't have time for warrants and red tape and bureaucracy. Finally, she nodded. This conversation never happened officially. If anyone asks, you were never there. Understood. Understood. Hayes turned back to the scene, back to evidence and suspects in the machinery of justice starting to turn. Cole watched her go, watched her become cop again after being human for a brief moment. Bull was beside him, voice quiet. You okay, brother? Cole looked at the drawing in his pocket, at Greer being held by her mother, at the man in handcuffs being loaded into a police car, at 7 brothers who dropped everything and come running because that's what brotherhood meant. No, he said, none of us are ever okay. But today, maybe we made something okay for someone else. Bull nodded. That's all we can do. Make the world slightly less terrible one day at a time. Wire approached, phone in hand, face serious. You need to see this. What? Wire pulled up a photo from the trafficker's phone. From deep in the message history, a little girl, 12 years old, dark hair, face that looked familiar in the way that photographs of missing children look familiar after years of hoping. Bull leaned over, went completely still, his face drained of color. His hands started shaking. Not from age, not from fear, from recognition, from hope that was more painful than despair, because despair at least was certain. That's Sophie. Bull's voice came out choked. That's my niece. She's alive. The words hung in the Texas heat, in the parking lot that smelled like gasoline and fear, in the beginning of something that felt like purpose. Sophie Garrett, Bull's niece, disappeared 6 years ago from a playground in San Antonio. Vanished like smoke, like dream, like punishment for sins nobody could name. Bull had spent 6 years looking, following leads that went nowhere, chasing shadows, dying slowly from guilt and grief and the kind of not knowing that was worse than any certain answer. The brothers had watched him become ghost of himself, had watched him volunteer for dangerous jobs because living with the wondering was harder than dying with the knowing. And now this photo, proof of life, proof that 6 years of hell had been worth surviving. Proof that sometimes the impossible happened and gave you reason to keep breathing. Where is she? Bull's voice was desperate now. Wire, where is she? Wire scrolled, reading messages, following digital trail. According to this, she's part of the delivery, one of the 15 kids at the warehouse. Bull grabbed Cole's shoulder. Reaper, we have to, I know, Cole said. We're going to get her. We're going to get all of them. But Bull was already moving, already heading toward his bike, already thinking about 6 years of grief converting into action, into rescue, into the chance to correct mistake the universe had made when it took his niece and gave nothing back but silence. Cole caught him. Bull, you can't go in hot. You know that. If we spook them, they'll scatter. They'll move the kids. We'll lose them. I don't care. Bull's voice broke. Sophie's alive. My Sophie is alive, and she's being sold like object, and you expect me to wait. That's exactly what I expect. Cole's voice went hard. Not mean, just firm. The voice of Sergeant at Arms. The voice that made decisions when emotion would get people killed. We do this right or we lose them all, including Sophie. Bull's face crumpled. 6 years of holding together or missing apart in parking lots south of Austin. 6 years of being strong enough to survive. 6 years of not knowing turning into one moment of knowing too much. Cole pulled him into a hug, the kind brothers gave when words weren't enough, when the only comfort you could offer was presence, was standing together in the darkness and refusing to let go. We're getting her back, Cole said into Bull's shoulder. I promise you, we're getting all of them back, but we do it smart. We do it right, and we make sure these bastards never hurt anyone ever again. Bull nodded against Cole's vest, trying to pull himself together, trying to be the man the situation needed instead of the uncle his heart was screaming to be. Wire cleared his throat. There's more. The messages mention a name. Vincent Cross. Cole froze. That name. That specific name from a past he'd thought was buried, from decisions made 12 years ago, from the day he'd learned that brotherhood had limits, that lines existed even outlaws couldn't cross. Vincent Cross had been Iron Brotherhood, had been VP when Cole first joined, had been the one who taught him everything, how to fight, how to ride, how to survive in a world that wanted to destroy men like them, had been mentor, had been brother, had been family in the way that mattered more than blood, until the day Vincent had killed a child. Rival club war, bullets flying, chaos and violence, and the kind of situation where you made split-second decisions and lived with consequences forever. Vincent had fired into crowd, had hit 8-year-old boy. Son of rival club president, had killed him instantly. Vincent claimed accident, claimed he didn't see the kid, claimed fog of war made everyone guilty of things they regretted. But Cole had seen his face after, had seen lack of remorse, had seen coldness that said maybe it was an accident, maybe it was message, maybe it was the kind of crossing line that meant you'd become monster instead of man. The club had voted 60-40 to expel him, strip his patches, send him out with nothing, make him exist alone in a world that required brotherhood to survive. Cole had led the vote, had stood in front of everyone and said there are lines even we don't cross. That killing kids made you something we couldn't protect, something we wouldn't protect. Vincent had stared at him during the vote, silent, eyes promising things that didn't need words, had walked out wearing cut with all patches ripped off, leaving threads and empty spaces where identity used to be, had turned at the door, spoken 6 words that Cole had remembered every day since. I'll take everything you love, brother. That had been 12 years ago. Cole hadn't heard Vincent's name since, had assumed he'd died or disappeared or found new club to take him in, had hoped the threat was empty. That time would turn revenge into acceptance, that wounds would heal instead of fester. Should have known better, should have known that men like Vincent didn't forget, didn't forgive, didn't move on. Should have known that 12 years was nothing compared to grudge. That hate was patient. That revenge waited until it could hurt most. Vincent Cross. Cole said the name like curse, like prayer, like thing that needed exercising. He's running this. You know him, Bull said. Not question, statement. He used to be one of us, used to be my mentor, until he killed a kid and I led the vote to throw him out. Wire pulled up more information, financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts. Vincent's built an empire. The trafficking network spans 5 states. Been running for 12 years. Started right after you expelled him. The timeline clicked. The revenge made sense. Vincent hadn't moved on. He'd built something worse. Had taken the thing Cole had accused him of and made it systematic. Had turned accident into business model. Had decided if he was going to be monster, he'd be one that made millions. One that destroyed families. One that proved Cole had been right to fear him. And now this. Greer's kidnapping. Sophie's captivity. 15 children waiting in warehouse. 2 hours until meeting. Until delivery. Until innocence was sold to highest bidder. Hayes was walking back over. We've got warrants being processed. FBI is mobilizing. But it's going to take time. We don't have time, Cole said. Meeting's in 2 hours. If we wait, they'll scatter. What are you suggesting? I go in. Undercover. Buyer looking for merchandise. He nearly choked on the word. Looking to see the inventory. Once I'm inside and I've confirmed the kids are there, we signal and you breach. Hayes stared at him. You're talking about walking into a trafficking operation, run by a man who wants you dead. With no backup except bikers, I can't officially acknowledge. Yes. You're insane. Cole smiled. No humor in it. I've been called worse, usually by people who were right. Bull stepped forward. He's not going alone. 6 of us go. Iron Brotherhood shows up to shady meeting. Nobody's going to question it. We're exactly the kind of customers they'd expect. Hayes looked at the assembled bikers, at men who'd dropped everything and shown up. Who'd stood in parking lot in 100-degree Texas heat because one of their own called. Who were offering to walk into nightmare because children needed saving. She made decision, the kind that would probably cost her career if it went wrong. The kind that would save lives if it went right. The kind that said sometimes you had to trust instinct over regulation, had to choose action over caution, had to believe that broken men were capable of unbroken things. This conversation never happened, Hayes said. But if you're going in, you're wearing a wire. And at the first sign of trouble, I'm breaching whether you signal or not. Understood. Understood. Greer was watching from her mother's arms, small face peering over Bryn's shoulder, looking at Cole like he was something worth watching, worth remembering, worth trusting. Cole walked over, knelt down again, making himself small, making himself approachable, making himself something other than the intimidating wall of leather and violence. Greer, I have to go do something. But I promise you're safe now. This man. Cole pointed at the one being loaded into police car. And all his friends. They're never going to hurt you or anyone else. I promise. Are you going to save the other kids? She asked. Voice small but determined, the ones he was talking about in his messages. Yes. Greer reached out, small hand touching Cole's vest, right over the pocket where her drawing was, right over his heart. Be careful, she said. The scary bikers who save people need to be safe too. Something in Cole's chest cracked wider, the thing he'd spent decades building. The armor that said, don't care because caring hurts. Don't love because love leaves. Don't hope because hope lies. But this 6-year-old girl had just handed him hope, had just given him drawing that said maybe he was worth saving too, had just touched his vest like blessing, like permission, like belief. I'll be careful, he said. I promise. Bryn Sullivan was crying again, quieter this time. The tears of someone who'd been given back, thing they thought was lost forever. She reached out, touched Cole's shoulder. Thank you, she said again. Not just for Greer, but for going after the others, for being what we needed when we needed it. Cole stood, nodded, couldn't speak past the thing in his throat, the emotion that had no name, the feeling that maybe decades of bad choices had been preparation for this moment, that maybe being broken meant you knew how to help other broken things. He walked back to his brothers, 7 men who'd become family, who'd chosen each other when the world gave up on them, who stood together because standing alone meant dying in ways that had nothing to do with stopping breathing. 2 hours, Cole said. We gear up, we plan, and we walk into that warehouse and get those kids out, every single one of them. And Vincent, Bull said, voice hard. What about Vincent? We make sure he never hurts anyone ever again. Through legal channels, through justice, through making sure he spends rest of his life in cage so small he'll wish we'd killed him instead. The brothers nodded, understanding. This wasn't about revenge, was about rescue, was about making sure 15 children went home, about making sure Sophie saw her uncle again, about proving that sometimes the worst of society could do best thing possible. They mounted their bikes, 7 Harleys firing up in sequence, the sound like thunder, like promise, like war cry, like the thing that meant brotherhood was more than word, was action, was showing up, was standing between innocence and darkness, even when standing meant you might fall. Cole looked back one last time, at Greer safe in her mother's arms, at Hayes coordinating with her team, at the trafficker in handcuffs learning that monsters sometimes got caught, at the gas station that looked so much like the one where his father had left him 33 years ago. But this time Cole wasn't the one being left. This time he was the one doing the saving. This time he got to be the father figure a scared child needed, even if only for afternoon, even if only for moment, even if only in pretend. Sometimes pretend was enough. Sometimes acting like dad was practice for being dad. Sometimes the role you played taught you who you could become. Cole's phone buzzed. Message from Wire. Warehouse location confirmed. Meeting in 1 hour, 45 minutes. 15 minutes to get there. 90 minutes to plan. He looked at his brothers. At Bull, who'd just learned his niece was alive. At Wire, who'd aged out a foster system and found family in patches. At 5 others who'd come running because that's what brotherhood meant. Let's ride, Cole said. And they did. 7 motorcycles heading south. Into afternoon heat. Into danger. Into situation that could get them killed or arrested or both. But riding anyway. Because 15 children needed them. Because Sophie Garrett needed her uncle. Because Greer Sullivan had drawn Cole with wings, and that meant something. Meant he had to try. Had to rise. Had to be the thing she'd seen in him even if he couldn't see it in himself. The highway stretched ahead, hot and long and leading somewhere that smelled like gasoline and fear, in the beginning of the kind of story that changed men. That transformed outlaws into protectors. That proved redemption wasn't about erasing past, was about choosing different future. Part 1 was ending, the setup complete, the players positioned, the stage set for warehouse that held horrors and hope for heroes, for confrontation between brother who'd stayed true and brother who'd become monster, for a moment when Cole Brennan would have to decide who he was, what he stood for, whether he was worth the wings a 6-year-old girl had drawn. Behind them, gas station disappeared in rearview mirrors. Ahead, warehouse waited, and in between was just the road, the ride. The choice to keep moving forward even when everything in you screamed to run away. Cole kept his hand on the throttle, kept his eyes on horizon, kept Greer's drawing over his heart, kept Bull's grief beside him, kept brotherhood behind him, kept moving because stopping meant losing, meant 15 children stayed lost, meant Vincent won, meant pretending to be dad stayed predent instead of becoming something more. The Iron Brotherhood rode south, into danger, into purpose, into the kind of afternoon that would be remembered, that would be retold, that would prove that sometimes the scariest men became the fiercest protectors, that sometimes broken could fix broken, that sometimes love was violent act of protection instead of gentle word. And somewhere ahead, Vincent Cross waited, not knowing his former student was coming, not knowing 12 years of revenge were about to become justice, not knowing that some lines once crossed couldn't be uncrossed, that some choices couldn't be undone, that some men wouldn't stop until children were safe. The sun beat down, the motorcycles roared, and Cole Brennan rode toward warehouse that would change everything, toward moment that would define him, toward choice between who he'd been and who he could become. Behind him, gas station, ahead warehouse. In between, just man on motorcycle carrying drawing of angel wings and deciding maybe 6-year-old girls saw things adults had forgotten, saw potential in broken men, saw heroes and outcasts, saw fathers and strangers who'd never learned how to be anything but alone. Part 1 complete. Part 2 waiting, and 15 children counting on men who look like nightmares to become their salvation. The ride continued. The Iron Brotherhood clubhouse looked like every bad decision that led men to places society had given up on. Concrete walls, dim lighting, the smell of motor oil and cigarettes, and the kind of coffee that stayed in your system for days. Patches on walls from clubs that no longer existed. Photos of brothers who died young. The accumulated weight of lives lived outside the margins. 7 men stood around a table covered in weapons. Not the kind you bought at sporting goods stores. The kind that came from places where serial numbers had been filed off and questions weren't asked. The kind that meant business when talking failed. Cole spread out a map. Wire had pulled it from satellite imagery. Printed it on paper that showed every entrance, every exit, every shadow where someone could hide or run or die. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect. Abandoned industrial complex on Austin's south side. 3 buildings, broken windows. Graffiti covering walls that had once held the machinery of legitimate business, now holding the machinery of something darker. Something that traded in futures that would never exist, in childhoods that ended before they started. We go in as buyers. Cole's finger traced the main entrance. Wires created Digital Trail. We're oil executives from Dallas, looking to diversify investments. That's the cover story if anyone asks, but they won't ask because Vincent knows men who show up in leather don't explain themselves. Bull was pacing, had been pacing for 40 minutes, since they'd arrived, since they'd started planning, since he'd learned his niece was alive, and every second not moving toward her felt like betrayal, like choosing wrong thing, like failing her again. Rowan's in there. Bull's voice was tight. My Rowan, 6 years I've been looking, 6 years I've been dying inside, and you want me to wait outside? Cole looked at him, at brother who'd stood beside him through wars and funerals, and the kind of nights where mourning seemed impossible. At man who'd watched his niece disappear and spent 6 years becoming ghost of himself. Bull, if you go in and Vincent sees your face, he'll know. He'll know we made the connection. He'll move the kids. We'll lose them. We'll lose Rowan. The name hit different now. Not Sophie, Rowan. Real name. Real person. Real 12-year-old girl who'd spent 6 years in nightmare. Who'd survived things that killed parts of you that never grew back. Who needed her uncle to be smart instead of desperate. Bull stopped in pacing, stood there. Massive body shaking. Not from age, not from fear. From the thing inside of him that wanted to burn the world down. That wanted to tear through walls with bare hands. That wanted to hold his niece and never let go and kill anyone who'd ever touched her. I can't. His voice broke. Reaper. I can't just wait outside while she's in there. You're not waiting outside. You're the insurance. If something goes wrong, if the signal doesn't come, if we don't come out, you breach. You bring the war. You make sure those kids get out even if we don't. Bull's jaw worked, grinding teeth, making decision that went against every instinct, against the part of him that screamed uncle before brother, family before club, love before tactics. Okay, he finally said. Okay, but Reaper, you bring her out. You promise me you bring her out. I promise. Wire cleared his throat. There's something else. The messages mention a timeline. Vincent's planning to move the kids after this meeting, ship them to different locations. Split them up. This is our only shot. The weight of that landed. Only shot. If they failed, if they spooked Vincent, if the operation went wrong, 15 children would disappear, would be scattered across the country, would become ghosts that haunted parents for the rest of their lives. What's the buyer profile? One of the other brothers asked. Hammer, older member, 45, scarred face. The kind of damage that came from living hard and dying slowly. Wire pulled up files on his laptop. Based on the messages, buyers are varied. Some want labor, some want. He couldn't finish, didn't need to. They all knew, and all understood that evil came in varieties, that monsters had preferences, that childhood ended in different ways, but all of them were wrong. Cole felt sick, the kind of sick that had nothing to do with stomach. That came from knowing what he was about to do, about to pretend, about to play role that made his skin crawl, about to look at children and act like they were commodities, like innocence had price tags, like the worst thing humans did to each other was just business transaction. I'm going to have to. Cole started, stopped, started again. When I'm in there, I'm going to have to act like I'm buying, like I'm interested in, like I'm one of them. Bull's hand landed on his shoulder. Heavy, solid. The weight of understanding. We know what it's going to cost you. But those kids need you to do it. Rowan needs you to do it. Sometimes being the hero means looking like the villain long enough to get the job done. Cole nodded, couldn't speak past the thing in his throat, the knowledge of what was coming, the role he'd have to play, the mask he'd have to wear, the part of himself he'd have to pretend was real, even though it made him want to tear his own skin off. Hayes was in the parking lot, setting up command center, 3 unmarked vehicles, 8 officers in tactical gear, FBI liaison on phone coordinating with federal units that were en route but wouldn't arrive in time. Justice moved slow, evil moved fast. The math never worked out. She walked over to Cole, handed him a wire, small device that would transmit everything, that would record evidence, that would make sure whatever happened in that warehouse could be used in court instead of just in nightmares. You say the word perimeter and we breach. Every entrance, full tactical. But Cole, she paused, if you're in danger, if Vincent makes you, don't wait for the signal. Just get out. Get those kids to safety. We'll handle the rest. And if I can't get out, then we come get you. But try not to D. Paperwork's a nightmare when civilians get killed during operations we're not officially running. She was trying for humor. Landing in gallows. That was okay. Sometimes humor was the only thing standing between holding together and falling apart. Cole took the wire, put it on, felt it against his skin. Small piece of metal and plastic that meant accountability. That meant witnesses. That meant the difference between justice and just revenge. Bryn Sullivan was there, had driven from the gas station, couldn't stay away. Couldn't go home while 15 other children were living what her daughter had almost lived. Couldn't be anywhere except here, in parking lot, waiting, hoping, praying to God she probably didn't believe in anymore. She approached Cole, Greer holding her hand, small face, serious, looking at the motorcycles and the tactical gear and the preparation for violence with 6-year-old understanding that something big was happening. Mr. Brennan, Bryn said, her voice steady despite the tears, I need to tell you something about my husband. Cole waited, listening. Daniel was a journalist, investigative reporter. 6 months ago, he was working on a story about child trafficking in Texas. He found evidence. Names, connections. He told me he was close to exposing something big. She paused, breath catching. Memory sharp enough to cut. He died in a car accident, single vehicle collision. Police said he lost control, but Daniel was careful. He was always careful. And the week before he died, he told me if anything happened to him, it wasn't an accident. The pieces clicked. The pattern emerged. Daniel Sullivan investigating trafficking. Vincent Cross running operation. Daniel getting close. Daniel dying, 6 months passing. Greer getting taken. Vincent targeted your daughter, Cole said. Not question, statement, as revenge, as message, as making sure you stopped asking questions about your husband's death. Bryn nodded, tears streaming. I should have seen it. Should have protected her better. Should have known they'd come after us. You couldn't have known. And Greer's safe now. But Mrs. Sullivan, why are you telling me this? Because Vincent Cross, she said the name like poison, like curse, like thing that needed exorcising. He killed my husband, and he tried to take my daughter. And I need you to know that when you go in there, when you see him, when you have chance, you make sure he pays. You make sure he never hurts another family. Cole looked at her, at widow who'd lost husband and almost lost daughter, at mother who'd worked 3 jobs and kept going, at woman who'd survived what would have broken most people and was still standing, still fighting, still believing that justice was possible. I will, he promised. I'll make sure he pays for all of it. Greer tugged his vest, the one with patches, the one that marked him as outlaw, as dangerous, as the kind of man you crossed the street to avoid. But she wasn't avoiding, wasn't scared, was looking up at him with trust that felt heavier than body armor. "You're going to save the other kids," she said, "like the ones in the messages." "Yes. Will you be safe? I'm going to try." She pulled something from her pocket. Small bracelet, made of plastic beads. The kind children made at school or summer camp. The kind that meant something because of who made it, not because of what it was. "My daddy gave this to me. Before he died. He said it would keep me safe. But I think you need it more right now." Cole's eyes burned, the thing in his chest cracking wider, the armor falling away. The protection he'd spent decades building, proving useless against six-year-old girl, offering him plastic bracelet like it was shield. Like it was salvation. Like it mattered. He knelt down, let her put it on his wrist. The beads barely fit. Made for child's wrist, not grown man's. But he wore it anyway. Would wear it into warehouse. Would wear it during whatever came next. Would wear it like promise. Like reminder. Like the thing that said some people believed he was worth saving. "Thank you." His voice came out rough. "I'll bring it back to you. I promise. You better," she said, small voice serious. "Because I want to hear about the other kids. About how you saved them. About how you were brave." Cole stood, looked at Bryn, at Greer, at the family Vincent had tried to destroy, at the evidence that love was stronger than hate if you gave it chance, if you fought for it, if you refused to let monsters win. "We're moving out," Hayes called. 1 hour until meeting time. Get in position." The brothers mounted their bikes, 6 of them, hammer. 3 others whose names were less important than their presence, than their willingness to ride into danger because that's what brotherhood meant. Because standing together was the only thing that made standing possible. Bull stood by his motorcycle, not mounting, not moving, just watching them prepare to ride away, watching them head toward his niece while he stayed behind. The hardest thing he'd ever done. Harder than burying his wife. Harder than searching for 6 years. Harder than learning to live with not knowing. Cole rode over, stopped beside him, engine idling, the sound like heartbeat, like promise, like the thing that connected them across whatever came next. "We're bringing her home," Cole said. "Rowan comes home today, I swear it." Bull couldn't speak, just nodded, just raised his fist, just gave the gesture that meant brotherhood, that meant trust, that meant I believe you even when I don't believe in anything else. The 6 motorcycles rolled out, formation tight, moving like single organism, like pack, like the thing they'd become through years of riding together, through wars and funerals and the kind of nights that taught you who would stand when everyone else ran. The warehouse district looked abandoned, was abandoned. 3 buildings that had once manufactured car parts, that had employed hundreds, that had been machinery of legitimate economy before economy moved elsewhere and left buildings to rot, left spaces for illegitimate things, for darkness to fill the vacuum. They parked in the lot, gravel crunching under tires, the sound too loud in the afternoon silence. No one around, no witnesses, no cameras, just the perfect place for transactions that couldn't exist in light, that needed shadow, that required everyone to look away. Marcus Kane was waiting outside, the man from the gas station, no longer in polo shirt, now in tactical gear. Body armor, the outfits saying this was business, this was protected, this was not something you could disrupt without consequences. He recognized Cole, smiled slightly, the kind of smile that said, "I know what you did to me. I remember the grip on my wrist. I remember the humiliation. And I'm going to enjoy what comes next." "You're late," Marcus said, voice flat, professional. The affect of someone who'd done this so many times it was routine. Children were inventory. Buyers were customers. Trauma was just cost of doing business. Had to make sure we weren't followed. Cole's voice came out steady, despite the sick feeling, despite the knowledge of what he was about to see, despite the wire pressing against his chest, recording everything. Creating evidence, building case, making sure justice was possible. Marcus studied them. 6 bikers, leather and patches. The look of men who'd lived outside law long enough to look comfortable there. Men who fit the profile, who were exactly the kind of customers this operation served. You got the money, wire pulled out a phone, showed account balance. The number was fake, created by FBI, but looked real. $500,000, the price of innocence, the cost of childhood, the amount that made men like Marcus willing to destroy futures. Marcus nodded, satisfied. Come on, but I wasn't expecting this many of you. My brothers go where I go, Cole said. Problem. Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. No problem. But Vincent's going to want to verify everything. Marcus paused, careful these days. They followed him toward the main building, through door that hung crooked on broken hinges, into interior that smelled like mold and rust and something worse. Something organic, something human. The smell of fear and unwashed bodies and the kind of despair that soaked into concrete. The warehouse opened into vast space, high ceiling, broken windows filtering afternoon light into dusty beams, industrial equipment still present, conveyor belts frozen mid-motion, machinery that would never move again, ghosts of legitimate industry. But that wasn't what Cole saw, wasn't what made his breath catch, wasn't what made the sick feeling in his stomach become something worse. 15 children sat on the floor, ranging from maybe 5 to 14, some crying, some too hurt to cry, some just staring at nothing with eyes that had seen things that killed parts of you, that left spaces inside where childhood used to be. They were clean. That was somehow worse. Someone had bathed them, dressed them in nice clothes, made them presentable, made them look like products ready for sale, like the horror was professional, like this was business conducted with attention to detail. Cole's hands clenched, the wire against his chest suddenly too hot, too tight. The evidence it was gathering not enough, would never be enough. No amount of justice could undo what these children had experienced. No amount of prison time could give back what had been taken. Wire stepped closer to Cole, whispered. Rowan's third from the left. Dark hair, blue shirt. Cole looked, found her, 12 years old. Bull's niece, 6 years of captivity written into her face, into the way she held herself, into the flinch that happened when Marcus walked too close, the body remembering danger even when mind tried to forget. She looked like her uncle. Same jaw, same serious eyes, same something that said even broken she wasn't destroyed, even captured she wasn't conquered, even traumatized she was surviving. 8 men stood around the perimeter. Vincent's security, armed, alert. The kind of presence that said this operation was protected, that violence was available if negotiation failed, that these children weren't leaving unless the price was met. And then Vincent stepped out of the shadows. He looked good. That was the first thought. Shouldn't have been, but was. 12 years since Cole had seen him, since he'd led the vote to expel him, since he'd stripped his patches and sent him into world alone, Vincent had thrived in exile, wore expensive suit, clean-shaven, hair-styled, the look of legitimate businessman, of philanthropist whose name appeared on charity boards, of man who donated to children's hospitals while running operation that destroyed children. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. This was the man who'd taught Cole everything, who'd been mentor, who'd been brother, who'd saved his life twice in club wars, who'd been family when family meant more than blood. And this was the man who'd built empire from suffering, who'd turned children into commodities, who'd proven that sometimes people you loved were capable of things that made love insufficient, that made forgiveness impossible, that made mercy look like weakness. Hello, Reaper. Vincent's voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of someone who'd reinvented himself, who'd left outlaw life behind and found something more profitable, more destructive, more evil than anything leather and patches could create. Vincent, the name came out neutral, not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement, just the sound of former brothers meeting after 12 years, after the vote, after the expulsion, after everything that made this moment both inevitable and impossible. Been a long time, not long enough. Vincent smiled, the smile reaching his eyes. Cold, empty. The smile of someone who'd stopped feeling things that made you human, who'd traded conscience for profit, who'd become exactly what Cole had feared he would. I wondered if you'd come when I saw the buyer profile, when I saw Iron Brotherhood connections. I thought maybe my old student would be curious about what I've built, what I've accomplished since you threw me away like trash. The words were designed to hurt, to provoke, to make Cole react instead of think. Vincent had always been good at that, at finding pressure points, at pushing buttons, at making you angry enough to be stupid. But Cole had spent 12 years learning control, learning that anger was tool not master, learning that sometimes staying calm was more dangerous than losing your temper. Impressive operation, Cole said, voice steady, looking at children like they were inventory, like he was buyer evaluating merchandise, like his soul wasn't screaming at the performance. You've clearly been busy. Busy, Vincent laughed. I've been revolutionary. You threw me out for killing one kid, accidentally, in war. And you know what I learned? If you're going to be monster anyway, might as well be monster who profits. He walked closer, hands in pockets, casual, like they were discussing weather instead of atrocity. Like 15 children weren't sitting 10 feet away listening. Like this was normal conversation between old friends. You taught me that. Did you know? When you led that vote, when you stripped my patches, when you told everyone there were lines we don't cross, you taught me that lines are illusions, that morality is luxury, that the only thing that matters is power. Cole said nothing. Let Vincent talk. Let him incriminate himself. Let the wire record every word. Let evidence build. Let justice sharpen into something that could cut. So I built this, Vincent gestured at the warehouse, at the children, at the empire of suffering. 12 years, 5 states, 68 children, 2.3 million in profit. All because you taught me that being outlaw with conscience was stupid. That if you're already outside the law, you might as well go all the way. The math was devastating. 68 children, 12 years, average of 5 or 6 per year, each one representing family destroyed. Childhood ended, future erased. The scale was industrial, was systematic, was the kind of evil that required planning and organization and the complete absence of everything that made humans worth the space they occupied. Wire was recording, getting everything. Names, numbers, admission of guilt. The kind of evidence that built cases, that put people in cages, that made sure monsters didn't walk free. So, Vincent said, you're here as buyer. You want to pick one. Want to see what your morality got you. Want to understand that the lines you draw don't matter. That kids get hurt whether you watch or whether you pretend it's not happening. Cole felt Greer's bracelet on his wrist, plastic beads that represented faith. That said someone believed he was better than this moment, better than this role, better than the thing he had to pretend to be. Show me the inventory. The words tasted like poison, like betrayal, like every bad choice compressed into 3 words. But he said them because 15 children needed him to, because Rowan needed her uncle, because sometimes being hero meant looking like villain long enough to get close enough to strike. Vincent smiled wider. That's my student, always practical, always willing to do what's necessary. He walked toward the children. Cole followed. Wire behind him, the other brothers forming loose perimeter, positioning themselves near exits, near the security, near the places where violence would erupt when signal came. The children looked up as Vincent approached, fear in their eyes, recognition, the knowledge that this man was the one who decided things, who had power, who determined whether tonight ended in rescue or just another customer taking someone away. This is premium inventory, Vincent said. Voice clinical, professional, the affect of someone showing products. Ages 5 to 14, various. He paused. Various uses. Depending on buyer interest. Prices range from $250,000 to $500,000 depending on age, and he stopped. Condition. Cole wanted to vomit, wanted to scream, wanted to tear Vincent apart with his bare hands, wanted to burn the world down and start over, wanted to undo every second that led to this moment, every choice that made this nightmare possible. But he kept his face neutral, kept his role, kept the performance that would keep him alive long enough to save them. I'm interested in older, Cole said. Force the words out. Make them sound convincing. Teenagers, strong, won't give me trouble. Vincent nodded, like this was reasonable requests, like discussing children's features was normal business conversation, like humanity hadn't left the building permanently. Smart, older ones are more expensive, but less maintenance. They've learned by now that fighting doesn't help, that cooperating means less pain. The casualness of it was obscene, was beyond evil. Was the kind of thing that made you understand why humans invented concepts like hell. Because some acts were so wrong they required eternal punishment, required suffering that matched the suffering they caused, required justice that existed outside the boundaries of human law. Her, Cole pointed at Rowan, third from the left. Dark hair, blue shirt, Bull's niece who'd been missing for 6 years, who needed to go home, who needed her uncle, who needed this nightmare to end. Vincent's expression changed, subtle, the shift from businessman to something else, something that understood, that knew, that had been waiting for this exact moment. Interesting choice, Vincent said softly. Very interesting. You know who she is, don't you? Cole said nothing, but his silence was answer. Vincent laughed, not humor, cruelty, the sound of someone who'd been planning this, who'd orchestrated this, who'd known Cole would come, would try to save them, would walk into trap because that's what heroes did. Rowan Garrett. Vincent said the name like reveal, like trump card, like the thing that made checkmate inevitable. Bull's niece, missing 6 years. You really think I didn't know you'd figure it out? Didn't know you'd come? Didn't know this whole thing was designed to get you right here? The security moved, guns coming up. 8 men with weapons trained on Cole and his brothers. The trap springing. The moment shifting from rescue operation to ambush. Wire's hand moved toward his weapon. Cole shook his head slightly. Not yet. Not with guns pointed at children. Not with one wrong move meaning bloodbath. You think I've spent 12 years building this just for profit? Vincent's voice went cold, hard, the businessman mask falling away completely. I built this to hurt you, to show you that your morality means nothing, that your lines are meaningless, that the world doesn't care what you think is right. He walked closer, close enough that Cole could see his eyes, could see the thing that lived there now, the absence, the void, the place where humanity used to be. Every child I took, every family I destroyed, every dollar I made, it was all to prove a point to you, that you were wrong, that I was right, that monsters win. Cole's heart was hammering, the wire against his chest recording everything. Every admission, every confession, every piece of evidence that would put Vincent away forever. But evidence didn't matter if they didn't survive to deliver it. Didn't matter if guns fired and children got caught in crossfire. Didn't matter if trying to be hero just got more people killed. Where's Bull? Vincent asked. I know he's here. Know he's waiting. Know he heard about his precious niece and lost his mind. So where is he? Outside. With the police. Vincent's laugh was genuine this time. You brought the cops, my old student working with the system. How the mighty have fallen. And here I thought you'd come for revenge. Thought maybe you'd learn that justice is just word people use to feel better about vengeance. Cole said nothing. Calculating odds. 6 brothers against 8 security plus Vincent. Guns against guns. Children in the middle. The math didn't work. The situation was designed not to work. Was designed to end one way. With Vincent winning. With Cole dead. With the point proven. Any last words? Vincent asked. Before I prove that your moral superiority got you killed and changed nothing. The door burst open. Detective Reese Hayes walked in. Alone, unarmed, hands up, the submission clear, the surrender apparent, the betrayal obvious. Vincent's security swung guns toward her. She stopped, stood there, professional bearing despite the situation. Despite walking into warehouse full of armed men, despite inserting herself into nightmare. Lower your weapons, Hayes said, voice calm, authoritative. The tone of cop who'd done this before, who'd negotiated with criminals. Who'd learned that confidence sometimes bought seconds, and seconds sometimes saved lives? Vincent stared at her, recognition dawning. Detective Hayes, State Police. We've met before. At charity events, at fundraisers. You know my legitimate face, my respectable face. I know all your faces, Hayes said, and I know about your operation, about the network, about everything. Cole's wearing a wire. FBI's listening. Your admissions are recorded. It's over, Vincent. Vincent's expression didn't change, didn't show concern, didn't show the fear that Hayes's words should have triggered. Instead, he smiled. A wire, of course a wire. You think I didn't scan him? Think I didn't check? Think I'm amateur who gets caught by basic police work? He pulled something from his pocket. Small device. Jammer. The kind that blocks signals. That made wires useless. That turned evidence into static. Been jamming since you walked in. FBI's hearing nothing but white noise. Whatever you think you're recording is garbage. Inadmissible. Useless. Hayes's face didn't change. Didn't show the panic Cole felt rising. The understanding that the wire was dead. That the evidence was gone. That they'd walked into a trap that was better planned than they'd feared. So, Vincent said, we're back to simple equation. You all die. The kids stay. And I prove my point. That doing the right thing just gets you killed while monsters thrive. Hayes took a step closer. And what's the point of proving your point if you're dead too? Because that's how this ends, Vincent. Even if you kill us, even if you win this moment, you've already lost. What are you talking about? Hayes smiled, no humor in it. Just cold calculation, just the look of someone who'd been 2 steps ahead the whole time, who'd anticipated the jammer, who'd planned for the trap. You think we relied on one wire, one piece of evidence, one recording that you could block? Vincent, we've been building case against you for 8 months. Since before Cole even knew you were involved. Since before this meeting was planned. She pulled out phone, showed screen, financial records, shell companies, offshore accounts. The digital trail Wire had compiled. The evidence that existed outside the warehouse, outside Vincent's control, outside the jammer's reach. We have your communications, your financial transactions, your network contacts. We have witnesses willing to testify. We have physical evidence from a dozen locations. We have everything we need to put you away for life, with or without what happens here. Vincent's face changed, the confidence cracking, the understanding settling in. The realization that the trap had worked but not the way he'd planned, that he'd been so focused on proving point to Cole, he'd missed the larger operation building around him. So your choice, Hayes continued, is simple. You can kill us all, win this moment, and die in shootout with FBI tactical team that's currently surrounding this building. Or you can surrender, live long enough to stand trial, maybe even tell yourself you're still beginning because you'll argue in court. Make your speeches, prove your point to jury. Vincent looked around, at his security, at the children, at Cole standing between him and Rowan, at the warehouse that had been his empire, his proof, his monument to the idea that morality was weakness. The silence stretched, seconds feeling like hours, everyone waiting for decision that would determine whether this ended in rescue or massacre, whether 15 children went home or became collateral damage, whether Cole's promise to Bull would be kept or broken. Then Vincent moved, hand toward his pocket, the motion fast, ambiguous. Could be surrender, could be weapon, could be the thing that started shooting. Hayes drew her weapon, trained it on Vincent's center mass, the movement professional. Clean. The result of thousands of hours of training. Don't, her voice was command, not plea. Don't make me shoot you in front of these kids. Don't make that the last thing they see. Hands up, now. Vincent's hand stopped, halfway to his pocket, the moment frozen, the decision hanging in space between intention and action, between living and dying, between evil winning and justice prevailing. Then doors exploded inward. Every entrance breached simultaneously. FBI tactical, state police, 25 agents in full gear moving like coordinated machine, like choreographed violence, like the thing that happened when the system actually worked. Get down, get down. the commands overlapping, shouted from multiple directions. The sound of authority backed by overwhelming force. Vincent's security tried to react, tried to bring weapons up, tried to defend, but they were outmanned and outgunned and too slow. Tactical teams moved like water, flowing around obstacles, surrounding, containing, neutralizing threats before threats could become violence. Marcus Kane tried to grab Rowan, tried to use her as shield, his hand reaching for her hair, his body moving toward her position. Bull Garrett came through the window, literally, on his motorcycle. Harley crashing through the high window and spray of glass and metal and the sound of engines screaming. The bike flying, airborne, landing hard, Bull rolling off mid-crash, his massive body tucking, rolling, coming up running. He hit Marcus like freight train. 240 pounds of fury and desperation and 6 years of grief converting into kinetic energy. Marcus went down, hard, skull bouncing off concrete, Bull on top of him, fists falling like hammers, like judgment, like the physical manifestation of consequences. Stand down, tactical teams shouting, at Bull, at everyone, trying to regain control of situation that had exploded into chaos. But Bull wasn't standing down, was hitting Marcus again and again, was making sure the man who'd held his niece captive understood pain, understood suffering, understood that some debts got paid in blood and broken bones and trauma that lasted forever. Cole moved toward Rowan, toward the children, putting himself between them and the violence, becoming shield, becoming wall, becoming the thing Greer had drawn, the biker with wings protecting innocence from the dark. Vincent pulled a gun, small pistol from his pocket, the thing his hand had been moving toward, the choice that ended negotiation, that turned this from arrest into shooting, that proved Hayes had been right to draw on him. He aimed at Rowan, not at Cole, not at Hayes, at the 12-year-old girl, at Bull's niece, at the thing that would hurt most, that would prove his point even in losing, that would take something precious before they took him. Cole's body moved. No thought, pure instinct. 20 years of dangerous living, teaching his muscles to act before his brain caught up. He threw himself at Rowan, arms wrapping around her, body covering hers, weight carrying them both to the ground. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet hit Cole's shoulder, left side high, the kind of wound that hurt like hell but wasn't fatal if you got lucky, wasn't vital if the bullet missed arteries, was survivable if you didn't bleed out. Cole felt the impact, felt his body register damage, felt blood starting to flow, but kept his arms around Rowan, kept himself between her and Vincent, kept his promise to Bull even as pain spread through his shoulder like fire. Hayes fired. 3 shots, center mass, professional grouping, the kind that ended threats permanently, the kind that didn't leave room for survival, the kind that said, "This stops now." Vincent went down, gun falling from his hand, his expensive suit turning red, his empire ending on warehouse floor, his point unproven, his victory hollow, his revenge incomplete. FBI swarmed him. But it was unnecessary. He was done. Dead or dying. The choice he'd made leading exactly where choices like that led. To concrete floors and blood pooling and the understanding, too late, that maybe morality wasn't weakness. Maybe mercy was strength. Maybe the lines mattered. Bull had stopped hitting Marcus, was staring at Rowan, at his niece, at the girl he'd spent 6 years searching for, at the family he'd thought was lost forever. Rowan. His voice broke on her name. "Baby, it's me. It's Uncle Bull." She looked at him. 12 years old, 6 years of captivity in her eyes, 6 years of trauma in the way she held herself, 6 years of learning that adults lied, that safety was illusion, that trust got you hurt. But something in her face shifted. Recognition, maybe. Memory. The ghost of girl she'd been before the nightmare. The echo of uncle who'd loved her. The proof that not everything was destroyed, that some things survived even hell. "Uncle Bull," she whispered, "is it really you?" Bull crawled toward her, moving slow, making himself small, making himself safe, making himself something other than the violence he'd just shown, making himself uncle again instead of warrior. Family instead of fighter. Love instead of rage. It's really me. I never stopped looking, never stopped hoping, never stopped loving you. I'm here, baby. I'm here, and I'm taking you home. They met in the middle, girl and uncle, 6 years of absence bridged in moment, in hug that looked desperate, that looked like drowning people holding each other above water, that looked like the thing that made everything worth it, that made the pain and the fear and the nightmare worth surviving. Cole was still on the ground, still covering Rowan, still bleeding, the pain in his shoulder sharpening, becoming insistent, becoming the thing he couldn't ignore. Hayes knelt beside him. Medic, need a medic over here. Tactical team responding. Paramedics coming through door. The machinery of emergency response deploying. The system working the way it was supposed to when people bothered to make it work. Cole looked at the children, all 15 of them, alive, breathing, free, being tended to by FBI agents who'd been trained for this, who knew how to approach traumatized kids, who understood that rescue was just the beginning, that healing would take years, that some scars never fully faded. But they were alive, were safe, were going home. Greer's bracelet was still on his wrist, plastic beads stained with his blood now, proof that promises kept cost something, that being hero meant bleeding, that saving others meant risking yourself. A small hand touched his arm. Rowan, looking down at him, at the man who'd taken bullet men for her, at the stranger who'd kept promise to her uncle, at the biker with wings who'd proven Greer's drawing was prophetic. Thank you, she whispered, for stopping him, for protecting us, for bringing my uncle back. Cole smiled despite the pain, despite the blood loss, despite everything. I promised him I'd bring you home. Had to keep the promise. Paramedics were working on his shoulder. Pressure, bandages, the professional movements that meant they knew what they were doing. That meant he'd probably survive. That meant he'd live to make more promises, to keep more promises, to be the thing a 6-year-old girl had drawn. Wire was gathering the children, helping FBI coordinate. Silas Thorne, the tech specialist, now being the gentle presence traumatized kids needed. Former foster kid knowing exactly how to talk to children who'd been abandoned by the system, who'd learned that adults weren't safe, who needed proof that some grown-ups could be trusted. Hammer and the other brothers were being debriefed, statements taken, evidence gathered, the legal machinery turning, the difference between outlaw justice and legitimate justice becoming clear. The line between revenge and the law, drawn in blood and broken glass, and children who were finally safe. Hayes stood over Vincent's body. He was dead. The 3 shots had done their job, had stopped the threat, had ended the network's leadership, had closed the chapter on 12 years of horror. She looked at Cole, at the biker bleeding on warehouse floor, at the outlaw who'd helped her take down trafficking ring, at the man who'd proven that sometimes the people you didn't trust were the ones who came through, who did the right thing, who chose the hard path because the easy one led nowhere worth going. Thank you, she said, for trusting me, for working with me, for proving that we're better together than we are apart. Cole nodded, couldn't speak. Blood loss making him lightheaded, making the world fuzzy, making the warehouse lights look like halos, like angels, like wings drawn by 6-year-old girl who'd seen something in him that he'd spent 41 years not seeing in himself. The last thing he saw before the world went soft was Bull holding Rowan. Father and daughter reunited, family reformed, the thing that made it all worth it. The reason why bleeding on concrete floor in abandoned warehouse felt like victory instead of defeat. Paramedics loaded him onto stretcher, started the work of keeping him alive, of stopping the bleeding, of making sure Promise Keeper didn't die before he could keep more promises. Hayes rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand, applying pressure to the wound, talking to him, keeping him conscious, keeping him present, keeping him aware that he'd done good thing, that 15 children were safe, that Rowan was going home, that Vincent was dead, that the network was falling, that justice was being served. You did good, Reaper, she said, voice soft. You did really good. Cole's eyes closed, not dying, just tired. The kind of tired that came from spending 41 years being hard. From 2 decades of outlaw life. From one afternoon of being exactly what a 6-year-old girl needed, what a 12-year-old girl needed, what 15 children needed, what the world needed even if the world would never know. Part 2 was ending, the rescue complete, the villain dead, the children safe, the price paid in blood and bullets, and the kind of choices that changed men. That transformed outlaws into heroes. That proved redemption was possible if you were willing to bleed for it. Behind them, warehouse emptied, children being carried out by agents, brothers giving statements, Bull holding Rowan and refusing to let go, Wire coordinating with FBI, Hammer watching it all and understanding that maybe the club had just changed. Maybe they'd just proven that leather and patches could mean protection instead of threat, safety instead of danger, family instead of gang. The ambulance doors closed. Sirens began. The drive to the hospital starting. Cole drifted, not unconscious, just floating. The adrenaline wearing off, the pain manageable under the medications the paramedics had given, the knowledge that he'd kept his promise, making everything else bearable. Hayes squeezed his hand. Stay with me. You don't get to die after all that. You don't get to save 15 kids, then check out. You've got too much left to do. Like what? Like showing those kids that some bikers are heroes. Like proving to Bull that his trust was earned. Like going back to that gas station and telling Greer Sullivan that you kept her bracelet safe. That you brought it home. That promises matter. Cole smiled, eyes still closed. That's a lot of responsibility for outlaw. Then maybe stop being outlaw. Maybe start being what that little girl drew. Maybe be the man with wings. The thought lodged in Cole's chest. Right next to the bullet wound. Next to the place where armor had cracked. Next to the space where maybe something new could grow. Something that looked like hope. Like purpose. Like the beginning of believing that 41 years of bad choices didn't define the next 41. That change was possible. That redemption was earned through action. Through showing up. Through bleeding when necessary and standing when possible and choosing to be better than everything that made you. Somewhere behind them, Bull was holding Rowan. Somewhere behind them, Wire was helping traumatized children. Somewhere behind them, a warehouse held evidence of evil, but also proof of good. Somewhere behind them, the Iron Brotherhood was learning that sometimes the best thing outlaws could do was stop being outlaws. Start being protectors. Be the thing society needed, even if society would never admit needing them. But that was part 3. That was the transformation. That was the choice that came after rescue. After violence, after proving that being scary could mean being safe. That looking dangerous could hide the dangerous capacity for love. For now, Cole just held on, kept breathing, kept his hand wrapped around Hayes' hand, kept Greer's bracelet on his wrist, kept the promise in his heart, kept going because stopping meant failing, meant breaking promises, meant being the father who left instead of the father who showed up. The hospital lights appeared ahead. Emergency entrance, trauma team waiting, the machinery of modern medicine preparing to save life that had spent decades not being sure it was worth saving. But was worth it now. Was worth it because 15 children needed to see him heal, needed proof that protecting others didn't mean dying, needed evidence that heroes survived, that good guys sometimes won, that the world wasn't completely dark if you were willing to be light. Part 2 complete. Rescue achieved. Price paid. Bullet taken. Promise kept. And somewhere in Texas afternoon, 15 families were about to learn their children were coming home. That nightmare was over. That monsters got caught. That sometimes the people you didn't expect turned out to be exactly who you needed. The ambulance stopped. Doors opened. Voices calling. Medical team moving. Cole being transferred from ambulance to ER. Hayes still there, still present, still keeping promise she'd made. That nobody died today who didn't deserve to. That Cole Brennan went home. That redemption got its chance, and behind them, miles away, in gas station parking lot, Greer Sullivan asked her mother when Cole was coming back, when she'd get her bracelet returned. When the biker with wings would tell her about the other children, about how he saved them, about how being brave meant being scared and doing it anyway. Soon, Bryn promised her daughter, he'll be back soon, because men who keep promises don't stop keeping them just because it's hard. Because heroes show up even when they're broken. Because sometimes the scariest looking people are the ones who care the most. And Greer believed her, because 6-year-olds understood things adults forgot. That underneath leather was just skin. That underneath patches was just heart. That underneath reputation was just man trying to be better than his past. Trying to build future that looked like the wings she'd drawn. That felt like the safety he'd given. That proved love was action, not word. Protection, not possession. Standing between innocence and dark even when standing meant bleeding. The warehouse stood empty now, just building again, just concrete and broken windows and the ghosts of horror that would haunt it forever. But also the ghosts of rescue, of Bull finding his niece, of Cole taking Bullet, of Hayes proving the system could work, of Iron Brotherhood learning who they could become if they chose transformation over tradition, if they chose protecting over profiting, if they chose to be what scared children needed instead of what scared children feared. Part 2 ended with hope, with rescue, with promises kept at cost of blood, with future that looked brighter than past even if brightness hurt to look at after so much darkness, with the understanding that change was possible, that redemption was real, that sometimes broken men fixed broken things because they understood breaking in ways whole people never could. And tomorrow, or next week, or whenever Cole healed enough to ride, he'd go back to that gas station, return Greer's bracelet, tell her about 15 children safe, about Rowan reunited with Bull, about how her faith had been armor against bullets, about how 6-year-olds saw truth that everyone else missed, about how being someone's dad, even in pretend, even for a moment, changed everything. But that was part 3. That was aftermath. That was transformation and choice and the hard work of becoming instead of just being. That was the perimeter forming, the protection spreading, the brotherhood choosing new purpose, the outlaw learning that maybe the most rebellious thing you could do was care, was protect, was love children that society had forgotten, was stand between innocence and darkness and refuse to move even when darkness had guns and money and 12 years of practice at winning. For now, just rescue, just victory, just the moment when nightmare ended and healing began. When 15 children took first breath of freedom. When one uncle got his niece back. When one biker learned his scars could save instead of just mark. When one detective learned that trusting outlaws sometimes meant justice happened. When one 6-year-old girl's faith in drawn angel got vindicated by bleeding hero who proved angels sometimes wore leather and rode motorcycles and looked nothing like what heaven was supposed to send. The hospital swallowed Cole, the work of healing beginning. The price of heroism being tallied. The cost of promises being calculated in blood type, in surgery hours, and recovery time measured in weeks, not days. But he'd paid it willing, would pay it again, would keep paying it every time children needed saving, every time someone asked him to pretend to be dad, every time wings needed wearing even if they were drawn by child's wand and existed only in belief, only in hope, only in the possibility that broken things could protect unbroken things. That scary could mean safe, that the monsters you feared could turn out to be angels you needed. Part 2 complete, the warehouse behind them, the healing ahead, and 15 children breathing free air, going home, beginning the long work of becoming something other than victims, beginning the longer work of being survivors, being children again, being safe and somewhere in the in-between, in the space between rescue and healing, between victory and transformation, between nightmare and dream. A 6-year-old girl held a drawing of biker with wings and believed he'd come back, believed promises mattered, believed grown-ups could be trusted if you picked the right ones, if you listened to instinct, if you ran towards scary instead of away when scary was the only hope you had. She was right to believe. The biker was coming back, was healing so he could keep coming back, was learning that being someone's hero meant showing up, again and again, through pain and doubt and the voice that said you're not good enough, you're too broken, you're just outlaw pretending. But pretending was practice, and practice became real. And real meant everything when children were counting on you, when uncles needed you, when the world needed proof that change was possible, that redemption worked, that the perimeter held because enough people refused to let it fall. Part 2 ended with hope, the most dangerous thing, the most powerful thing. The thing that kept you alive when everything else said dying was easier. The thing that made you heal when healing hurt. The thing that made you stand when standing meant becoming target. The thing that made outlaw become protector. Monster become hero. Broken become whole enough to help other broken things survive. And that was everything. That was the story. That was the truth a 6-year-old girl had drawn before she knew she was drawing prophecy. Before she knew plastic bracelet would become armor. Before she knew asking scary biker to pretend would save 15 children's lives. Would transform motorcycle club. Would prove that the perimeter held. Would always hold. As long as someone was brave enough to stand there. To bleed there. To be the wall between innocence and the dark. Part 2 complete. The rescue done. The blood spilled. The promise kept. In Part 3 waiting. The transformation. The choice, the hard work of becoming what a 6-year-old girl had seen. What 15 children needed. What the world required even if it would never thank them. Would never acknowledge them. Would never understand that sometimes salvation came from the last place you'd look. From the people you'd been taught to fear. From the men with leather and patches who'd learned that the only thing worth being was protector. Father, brother, friend, family. The perimeter that held. Always, forever. No matter what. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and decisions that lasted forever. White walls, machines that beeped rhythms nobody wanted to hear. IV drip measuring time in drops. The kind of place where you learned whether your body remembered how to heal or whether damage was permanent. Cole woke up to fluorescent lights and the understanding that being alive sometimes hurt worse than dying would have. His shoulder was fire, was proof that bullets didn't care about intentions, that heroism cost something tangible, that promises kept in blood left scars you carried forever. 3 hours of surgery. The bullet had missed the artery by millimeters, had fractured his collarbone, had done the kind of damage that meant months of physical therapy, meant learning to move differently, meant accepting that some prices you paid changed you permanently. But Rowan Garrett was alive, was safe, was with her uncle, and that made the fire in his shoulder feel like fair trade, like acceptable cost, like the kind of mathematics that actually added up to something worth the pain. Hayes was asleep in the chair beside his bed, still in tactical gear, still wearing the vest, still holding her service weapon like she expected the threat to return. Like 3-shot center mass wasn't enough. Like evil required eternal vigilance. She woke when Cole moved. Professional reflexes, the kind that came from years of sleeping light, of never being fully off duty, of understanding that danger didn't respect visiting hours. "You're awake," she said, voice rough. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot." "Because you did, taking a bullet for a 12-year-old girl. Very heroic, very stupid, very you." She smiled. The kind of exhaustion that came from 18-hour days and adrenaline crashes and the emotional weight of seeing things that confirmed your worst fears about humanity while also proving your best hopes. The kids. Cole's voice came out scratchy. All of them. Safe. All 15 in protective custody. FBI's coordinating with families. 12 of the 15 have been reunited already. The other 3. Hayes paused. Their families are deceased. Vincent's network killed parents who got too close, who asked too many questions, who wouldn't stop looking. The information landed like second bullet. 3 children orphaned by the machine that had captured them. 3 families destroyed completely. The kind of loss that echoed, that rippled, that proved evil wasn't contained, wasn't limited, wasn't something you could fully stop, just something you could fight. Every day, forever. What happens to them now? Foster system, temporary placement, then hopefully adoption. Hayes looked at him, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion. Unless someone steps up, someone who understands what they've been through, someone who's proven they'll bleed to protect children. Cole understood the implication, the suggestion. The idea that outlaw biker could become foster parent. That man with his history could be trusted with traumatized children. That society would allow someone like him near innocence after spending decades being told he was threat to it. I'm not, he started, stopped, tried again. I'm not exactly foster parent material. Why not? You took a bullet for a child you'd never met. You walked into a trafficking operation unarmed. You kept your promise even when keeping it meant bleeding. What part of that says you're not father material? The 20 years of outlaw life, the criminal record, the reputation, the fact that social services exist specifically to keep men like me away from children. Hayes leaned forward, elbows on knees, the posture of someone about to share truth that mattered. Cole, do you know what I saw in that warehouse? I saw a man who put 15 children's safety above his own life. I saw someone who kept his word when breaking it would have been safer. I saw exactly the kind of father those kids deserve. Cole said nothing, couldn't argue with her, couldn't argue with himself. The voice in his head that said you're not good enough was loud, was familiar, was the soundtrack of 41 years. But maybe Hayes was right. Maybe being good enough wasn't about past, was about present, was about choosing to be better, to do better, to show up even when showing up meant bleeding. Think about it, Hayes said. She stood, stretched, joints popping. I need to get back to the station. Paperwork doesn't file itself. But Cole, she paused at the door. Thank you for trusting me, for working with me, for proving that sometimes the bad guys are actually the good guys. She left. The room went quiet except for machines, except for the beeping that measured heartbeat. That proved alive even when alive felt complicated. Even when survival raised questions about what came next, about who you became after you stopped being who you were. The door opened again 20 minutes later. Cole expected doctor, expected nurse, expected someone official with clipboard and questions about pain levels and whether he could feel his fingers. Instead, Greer Sullivan walked in. 6 years old, blonde pigtails, face serious, her mother behind her. Bryn looking exhausted and grateful, and like she'd been crying for 18 hours straight. You came back, Greer said. Small voice, big statement. You promised you'd come back, and you did. Cole smiled despite the pain. Always keep my promises. Greer approached the bed, stood on tiptoes so she could see him better, so she could look at the man who'd acted like her dad, who'd saved her, who'd gone on to save 15 other children, who'd proven that scary bikers were sometimes exactly what scared children needed. Did you save them, the other kids, like me? Yes, all of them. They're safe now, they're going home. Greer reached out, small hand touching the bandage on his shoulder, the place where bullet had entered, the place where promise had cost blood, the place where heroism had left permanent mark. Did it hurt? Yes. Was it worth it? Cole looked at her, at 6-year-old asking questions that cut through complexity, that demanded honest answers, that understood intuitively that some things cost more than money, cost pieces of yourself, cost the easy path, cost the safety of not caring. Yes, it was worth it. Saving people is always worth it. Greer pulled something from her pocket, the bracelet, the one she'd given him, the one he'd worn into the warehouse, the one that was stained with his blood now, the plastic beads darker where red had soaked in, where faith had become evidence, where hope had become armor. You kept it safe, she said. Even when you got hurt, you kept it safe. Told you I would. Promises matter. She put it back on his wrist, carefully, avoiding the IV line, making sure it fit, making sure the blood-stained beads sat against his skin. Proof of what had happened. Reminder of what mattered. Symbol of the bond between 6-year-old girl and 41-year-old biker that shouldn't exist but did. That proved love was action. That connection was choice. That family was built, not born. Bryn stepped forward, eyes wet. I don't know how to thank you. Don't know what words exist for what you did. For saving my daughter. For going back for the others. For bleeding so they wouldn't have to. You don't need to thank me. Just keep her safe. Keep believing that the world has good people in it. Keep teaching her that asking for help is brave. That trusting the right people is strength. That sometimes the scary ones are the safe ones. Bryn nodded. We're going to therapy. Greer and I both. Processing what happened. Making sure she heals. Making sure she knows it wasn't her fault. Making sure she understands she was smart and brave and saved herself. That's good. That's important. And, Bryn paused, I'm going back to school, social work degree, because of what you showed us, that people from unexpected places can change everything. I want to be person who sees kids like Greer, who helps families like ours, who makes sure the system works instead of fails. Cole felt something crack in his chest, the thing that had been breaking since the gas station, since Greer grabbed his hand, since he'd learned that being someone's hero meant being changed by the heroism, meant becoming better because someone believed you could be. Your husband would be proud. Bryn's face crumpled, then reformed. Daniel. Yes, he would be. He spent his life trying to expose monsters, died because he got close. And you finished what he started. You made sure Vincent paid. You saved the children Daniel was trying to protect. She pulled out an envelope, handed it to Cole. This is for you, from Daniel's investigation. Names, connections, people Vincent worked with who aren't caught yet, people still out there, still operating. FBI has copies, but I wanted you to have it too, in case the system fails again, in case someone needs to do what you do, go where police can't, be what children need when nobody else will. Cole took the envelope, heavy, filled with information, with leads, with the work that came after rescue, the long fight, the generational war against people who saw children as commodities, who built industries from suffering, who wouldn't stop unless someone stopped them. I'll look at it, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Make sure Daniel's work continues. Make sure his death meant something. It meant everything, Bryn said, because it led to you, to this, to 15 children safe, to system being forced to care, to monsters being caught. That's legacy. That's the kind of meaning that lasts. Greer tugged Cole's hand, the one without the IV, the one that could still move. Mr. Cole, can I ask you something? Anything. Will you come to my birthday party? It's next month. I'll be 7. And she hesitated. And I want my hero there. Want to show my friends the biker with wings. Cole's eyes burned. The invitation simple. The meaning complex. The understanding that this 6-year-old girl wanted him in her life. Wanted continued connection. Wanted proof that rescue was an end. Was beginning. Was the start of something that looked like family, even if family tree had branches that shouldn't connect but did. I'll be there, wouldn't miss it. Greer smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Not the scared smile, not the relieved smile. The genuine smile that said childhood was still possible, that joy could exist after trauma, that healing happened when people showed up, when promises were kept, when scary bikers came to birthday parties and proved that love transcended appearance, that protection was action, that being hero meant being present, again and again, through recovery and healing and the long work of proving that safe was permanent, not temporary. They left after another 10 minutes, Greer waving from the door, Bryn promising to keep in touch, both of them carrying something they didn't have before. Hope that looked like biker with patches, faith that looked like kept promises. Understanding that rescue was beginning, not end, that the real work started after the warehouse, after the bullets, after the immediate danger passed and you had to figure out how to live in the after, how to be in the space between nightmare and normal, how to build new normal from ashes of old one. Bull arrived next, with Rowan, his niece, 12 years old, 6 years of captivity written into her posture, into the way she held herself close to her uncle, into the flinch that happened when the door closed too loud, but alive, breathing, home. Bull looked different. The weight he'd carried for 6 years lifted, but replaced with something else. The responsibility of protecting damaged child, of being patient when patience was hard, of understanding that rescue was just first step, that the real heroism was showing up every day after, through flashbacks and nightmares in the slow work of building trust that had been shattered. Brother, Bull's voice was rough, they told me, about the bullet, about what you did, kept my promise. You did more than that. You saved her life. Took bullet meant for her. I don't. Bull's voice cracked. I don't have words for what that means, for what you gave me, for bringing her home. Rowan stepped forward, slowly, the movement of someone who'd learned that fast movements led to pain. That approach meant danger. That safety was illusion that could shatter any second. But she came anyway, stood beside Cole's bed, looked at him with eyes that held too much, that understood things 12-year-olds shouldn't understand, that had seen the worst and somehow still found courage to keep looking. Thank you, she said, voice soft, damaged, the kind that came from screaming until your throat gave out, from crying until tears stopped coming, from begging until you learned begging was useless. You stopped him. When he was going to. When he aimed at me. You stopped him. Cole reached out, slowly, giving her space to retreat, to say no, to maintain the distance trauma required. But she took his hand, small hand in his large one, the trust implicit, the faith evident, the understanding that this man had proven safe, had taken bullet, had kept promise. I'm glad you're okay, Cole said. Glad you're with your uncle. Glad you're going home. Home. Rowan repeated the word like foreign language, like concept she'd forgotten, like place that might not exist anymore after 6 years of nowhere, of hell, of spaces that looked like rooms but felt like cages. We're working on it, Bull said gently, finding what home means now, building it together. Therapy, time, patience. She's been through. He couldn't finish, couldn't say the words. The reality too heavy, the knowledge too painful. The understanding that his niece had survived things that killed part of childhood that never grew back. She's strong, Cole said. Survivor. That matters. That's everything. Rowan looked at him, something in her face shifting. The ghost of who she'd been before. The echo of 12-year-old girl who'd loved soccer and horses and the normal things. The proof that not everything was destroyed, that some core remained. That healing was possible if you gave it time, if you gave it support, if you gave it the kind of love that said, I'm here, every day, forever, no matter what. Will I be okay, she asked. Small voice, big question, the kind that didn't have easy answer, the kind that required honesty instead of comfort. Cole didn't lie, didn't offer false hope, didn't pretend that surviving meant forgetting, that rescue meant instant healing. That going home erased 6 years. Some days you will be, some days you won't be. Some days you'll feel strong, some days you'll feel broken. But your uncle's here, and he's not going anywhere. And neither am I. You're part of the brotherhood now. That means protected. That means family. That means you're never alone again. Brotherhood. Rowan tested the word. Like me. Like you. We protect our own, and you're ours now. She nodded, processing, accepting, beginning the long work of believing, of trusting, of letting the wall down enough to let love in, to let safety mean something, to let rescue become real instead of just temporary respite before nightmare returned. Bull put his hand on her shoulder, gentle, the touch asking permission, the gesture saying, I'm here. She leaned into him, small movement, enormous meaning. The beginning of reclaiming body autonomy, of touch being comfort instead of threat, of family being safety instead of source of pain. They stayed for half an hour, Bull telling stories about Rowan before, about the 6-year-old who'd loved butterflies, who'd collected rocks, who'd made him tea parties with imaginary friends and real cookies. Rowan listening, remembering, the past coming back in pieces, in fragments, in the slow reconstruction of self that trauma had shattered. When they left, Rowan turned at the door, looked back at Cole. We're having dinner next week. Uncle Bull's house. Will you come? I'll come. Promise, promise. She smiled, small, broken, but real. The beginning of something. The first step. The proof that healing happened in small moments, in kept promises, in dinner invitations and birthday parties, and the normal things that made life worth living after you'd survived things that made living feel impossible. The door closed, the room quiet again. Just machines, just the beeping that measured heartbeat, just Cole and the understanding that something had changed. That warehouse had been turning point. That taking bullet had been choice that redirected everything. That being someone's hero meant becoming someone's family, meant showing up, meant proving that protection was permanent, that perimeter held, that the wall between innocence and dark was built from people who refused to move, who refused to break, who refused to let evil win. The next visitor surprised him. Silas Thorne, wire, tech specialist, 28 years old with baby face and old eyes, former foster kid who'd aged out of system, who'd learned that family was choice, that belonging was action, that the only people who'd protect you were the ones who chose to. Wire sat down, didn't speak immediately, just sat, the comfortable silence of people who'd been through war together, who'd seen each other at worst, who'd proven trustworthy when trust was expensive. Hospital. Wire finally said, not my favorite place. Spent too much time in them as kid. Social workers, doctors, everyone asking questions, nobody listening to answers. Cole waited, listening. I was in the system for 12 years, 3 to 15, 23 different placements, some okay, most not. Learned early that nobody actually wants damaged kids. They want checks, they want easy, they want gratitude without having to earn it. Wire looked at his hands, scarred from fights, from survival, from years of figuring out that the only person who'd save you was you. When I aged out, 15 years old, they gave me a backpack and a bus ticket, and congratulations, you're an adult now. I slept under bridges for 8 months, did things I'm not proud of to eat, learned that system doesn't actually care about kids, cares about appearance, cares about paperwork, cares about covering its ass when kids disappear into cracks. He paused, the memory sharp, the pain evident, the understanding that some wounds stayed open, some scars kept bleeding. Bull found me trying to steal his motorcycle. I was 17, desperate, stupid. He should have beaten the hell out of me, should have called cops, should have done what society expected. Instead, Wire's voice softened. He took me to the clubhouse, fed me, let me sleep on the couch, taught me that family was choice, that brotherhood meant something, that I mattered even when everyone else said I didn't. Cole understood, saw where this was going, recognized the story because it was his story, Bull's story, every brother's story, the collection of throwaways who'd found each other, who'd built something from broken pieces, who'd proven that sometimes the worst of society created the best of community, the strongest of bonds, the most loyal of families. Those 3 kids, the orphans, War said, they're going into the system. Same system that failed me, that failed Rowan, that fails kids every single day because it's designed to process, not protect, to document, not defend, to check boxes, not change lives. Cole knew what was coming, felt it, the question, the suggestion, the idea that was insane and perfect and exactly what scared him most because it mattered, because failing would mean everything, because succeeding would change who he was, what he was, how the world saw him and how he saw himself. Someone needs to step up, Wire continued. Someone who understands, who's proven they'll do whatever it takes, who won't give up when kids are difficult, when trauma makes them hard to love, when the easy thing is walking away. You're saying I should. I'm saying you already did. You took a bullet for a child you'd never met. That's more than most foster parents do for kids they're paid to care for. You've proven what matters, that you show up, that you protect, that you keep promises even when keeping them costs blood. Cole stared at the ceiling. White tiles, fluorescent lights, the mundane setting for conversation that could reshape everything, that could transform outlaw into father, criminal into caretaker, broken into someone who fixed broken things. I don't know how to be a father, don't know how to raise kids, don't know anything except motorcycles and violence and the kind of life that makes social workers nervous. Neither did I, Wire said, but I learned. Brothers taught me, showed me that being family means showing up, means being present, means choosing love even when love is hard, especially when love is hard. The conversation ended without decision, without commitment, without Cole saying yes or no, just the seed planted, the idea growing. The understanding that maybe this was what came next. What happened after warehouse, after rescue, after proving that being hero was more than one-time thing, was lifestyle, was choice made daily, was the work that continued when cameras left, when attention faded, when you had to be good person, not because anyone was watching, but because that's who you'd chosen to become. 3 days later, Cole was released from hospital. Arm in sling, shoulder screaming, painkillers making world fuzzy but bearable. Bull picked him up, drove him home, helped him inside. The clubhouse, the place that smelled like motor oil and brotherhood and the accumulated weight of lives lived outside margins. The brothers gathered, mandatory meeting, the kind called when decisions needed making, when the club had to choose direction, when tradition met transformation and only one could win. 43 members filled the room, full patch, prospects, hang-arounds, the hierarchy that made motorcycle clubs function, the structure that gave order to chaos, the system that said we're family, but family has rules. Bull stood at front, vice president, the man who'd been dead inside for 6 years, who'd been brought back to life by rescue, by miracle, by the understanding that sometimes lost things got found, that sometimes prayers were answered, that sometimes the impossible happened and gave you reason to keep breathing. Brothers, his voice carried, filled the space, demanded attention. We need to talk about what happened, about the warehouse, about working with about what it means going forward. Hammer stood, older member, scar face, traditional values, the voice of what had always been, of what shouldn't change, of resistance to evolution. We crossed a line, working with feds, with state police, wearing wires, going undercover. That's not who we are. We're outlaws, not heroes, not cops, not whatever Reaper's trying to turn us into. Murmurs of agreement, maybe a third of the room. The brothers who believed in old ways, who thought that transformation was betrayal, who saw cooperation with system as weakness, who wanted to stay what they had always been, even if what they'd been wasn't working anymore. Cole stood, slower than he wanted, shoulder protesting, but stood because this mattered, because the club was at crossroads, because the choice made tonight would determine who they became, what they stood for, whether the warehouse was beginning or end. We saved 15 children. Cole's voice was quiet but carried weight, carried authority earned through action, not just rank. We stopped a trafficking network. We brought Rowan home. We worked with police and nobody died except the man who deserved it. So tell me, Hammer, what line did we cross that's worse than letting kids get sold? Hammer's jaw tightened. That's not the point. Point is we're changing, becoming something we're not. We're bikers, outlaws. We live outside the system. We don't work with it. Why not? Wire stood, young voice. Foster kid who'd learned that systems failed, who'd survived despite not because of. If the system actually worked, we wouldn't need to, but it doesn't. So we do. We go where cops can't. We protect who they won't. We stand between kids and monsters because that's what brothers do. This isn't a charity, Hammer shot back. We're not social workers. We're not rescue operation. We're a motorcycle club. We have history, traditions, ways of doing things that worked for 50 years. And got us what? Bull's voice cut through. Angry, raw, got us reputations as criminals. Got us profiled, got us treated like threats, got us exactly nothing worth keeping. But saving Rowan, saving those 15 kids, that's something worth being. That's legacy worth leaving. The room divided, you could see it, feel it. The split forming, the brothers who believed in transformation versus those who believed in tradition. The ones who saw warehouse as beginning versus those who saw it as betrayal. The men who wanted to become protectors versus those who wanted to stay outlaws. Vote, King said, club president, older, wiser, the one who'd held everything together, who'd kept peace, who understood that sometimes clubs died not from external threats, but from internal division. This is what democracy looks like, brothers. We vote, we decide. We live with the decision together or we part ways honorably. The question is simple. Bull continued. Do we make this official? Do we become the perimeter? Do we commit to protecting children, working with police when necessary, being what society needs even if society never thanks us? Or do we stay traditional, stay outlaws, stay what we've always been, hands up for transformation? King called. 26 hands rose, including Cole, including Bull, including Wire, including brothers who'd seen the warehouse, who'd held crying children, who'd watched families reunite, who'd learned that sometimes the most rebellious thing you could do was care, was protect, was love the people society had decided were disposable. Hands up for tradition. 17 hands, including Hammer, including the older members, including brothers who believed in what had been, who couldn't see what could be, who chose comfort of known over risk of unknown. Decision made, King said, voice heavy, carrying the weight of what this meant. The Iron Brotherhood commits to the perimeter, to protecting children, to working with law enforcement when children's lives are at stake, to being more than outlaws, to being protectors. He paused, looked at the 17 who'd voted against. You're welcome to stay. This is still your club, still your family, but this is our direction. This is who we're becoming. You can grow with us or you can leave with honor. No shame either way, but the vote is final. Hammer stood, looked around the room. At Brothers he'd ridden with for 20 years, at the club that had been home, at the patches that had been identity. Then he started removing his vest, slowly, deliberately. The gesture that said, this is over. That said, I can't follow where you're going. That said, some lines I won't cross even if crossing means saving children. 16 others followed, one by one, removing vests, laying patches on the table, walking out. The exodus quiet, respectful, the kind of leaving that acknowledged different values, not wrong values, different priorities, not failed priorities, different vision, not failed vision. The door closed behind them. 26 brothers remained, 26 men who'd chosen transformation, who'd voted for becoming something new, who'd committed to the perimeter, to being the wall between innocence and dark, to making sure the warehouse wasn't one-time thing, was beginning, was mission, was purpose that gave meaning to lives that had been searching for meaning in all the wrong places. The room was quiet, heavy, the weight of schism, the understanding that family had fractured, that some brothers were gone, that the price of evolution was loss, was choosing between who you were and who you could become, was accepting that sometimes growing meant leaving people behind who couldn't grow with you. But 26 remained, 26 who believed, who committed, who understood that this was the work, this was the calling, this was what happened after warehouse, after rescue, after you learned that being hero wasn't one dramatic moment, was daily choice, was showing up, was protecting, was building something that lasted beyond single operation, single rescue, single bullet taken. 6 months passed, the kind that felt like years, the kind where every day brought new challenge, new case, new child who needed saving, new family that needed hope, new proof that the perimeter was more than name, was reality, was functioning, was making difference. Cole healed slowly, physical therapy 3 times a week, learning to move his shoulder again, learning that some damage was permanent, that taking bullet meant living with reminder, with the ache that came with weather changes, with the understanding that heroism left marks, left scars, left proof that you'd stood, that you'd bled, that you'd chosen protection over safety. But he healed enough, enough to ride, enough to work, enough to become what Wire had suggested, what Hayes had implied, what Greer's drawing had prophesied. He became foster parent. The process was nightmare. Paperwork that never ended, background checks that revealed everything, home inspections that made you feel like criminal, social workers who looked at him with skepticism, with doubt, with the understanding that outlaw biker wasn't typical foster parent profile. But Hayes vouched for him, testified to his character, provided evidence of the warehouse, of the bullet, of the 15 children who were alive because he'd chosen to protect them. And slowly, grudgingly, The system bent, accepted, approved. Finn Callahan came to live with Cole 3 months after the warehouse. 14 years old. Parents killed by Vincent's network. Father had been cop who'd gotten too close. Mother had been teacher who'd asked too many questions. Both dead in car accident that was an accident. Both murdered to silence them. Both added to the list of casualties in war against innocence. Finn was angry, rightfully so, was suspicious, understandably so, was damaged in ways that made connection difficult. That made trust impossible. That made love feel like trap, like weakness, like thing that got taken away, so why bother having it? First month was hell. Finn testing boundaries, breaking rules, pushing to see if Cole would give up, would send him back, would prove that all adults were liars, that all promises were temporary, that all safety was illusion that shattered when you needed it most. But Cole didn't give up, didn't send him back, didn't break, just showed up every day through angry outbursts and silent treatments and the kind of behavior that made you question every choice. Just kept being present, kept being consistent, kept being the wall that didn't move, the promise that didn't break, the safety that persisted even when safety was rejected. Second month was better. Finn started talking, started sharing, started letting the wall down inch by inch, started believing that maybe this man was different, that maybe this home was safe, that maybe this time wouldn't end like all the other times. Third month, Finn started calling him Cole instead of Sir, started asking about the motorcycle, started showing interest in the brotherhood, started understanding that leather and patches didn't mean dangerous, meant protected, meant family, meant belonging to something that chose you instead of being assigned to you. By 6th month, Finn was smiling, real smiles, the kind that said childhood was still possible, that joy could exist after trauma, that healing happened when someone refused to give up on you, when someone showed you that love was action, not word, protection, not possession, presence, not performance. The Perimeter Community Center opened 4 months after the warehouse, abandoned building on east side of Austin, the kind of place that had been eyesore, had been condemned, had been scheduled for demolition. Brotherhood bought it, renovated it, transformed it into space that mattered, that served, that protected. Grand opening was on a Saturday. Sunny, hot, Texas summer making everything shimmer. But people came, families, children, the curious, the skeptical, the hopeful, the ones who'd heard about the warehouse, about the rescue, about bikers becoming heroes, about outlaws becoming protectors. Greer was there. 7 years old now. Birthday had been month ago. Cole had attended, had brought Finn, had watched as 6, 7-year-olds ran around eating cake and playing games and proving that childhood survived. That trauma didn't define. That rescue was beginning, not end. Bull was there with Rowan, 12 years old, still in therapy, still healing, still having nightmares and flashbacks and the hard days that came without warning, but also having good days, days where she smiled, days where she talked, days where she remembered who she'd been before and started becoming who she was after. Stronger, wiser, scarred, but not destroyed. Bryn Sullivan spoke at the opening, stood at microphone, told her story about Daniel's death, about Greer's kidnapping, about the gas station, about Cole, about how one man saying yes when he could have said no changed everything, saved everything, proved that heroes were real. Were ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Were bikers with patches who wore angel wings drawn by 6-year-old girls? The Perimeter offers after-school programs, Bryn said. Voice steady despite emotion. Self-defense classes, tutoring, safe space, counseling. Everything children need to feel protected, to feel valued, to feel like they matter, because they do matter. Every single one of them matters. She looked at Cole, at the biker standing with Finn, at the foster father who'd become real father, at the man who'd kept every promise, who'd shown up, who'd proven that changing was possible if you committed, if you worked, if you refused to let past define future. This center exists because Cole Brennan chose to be brave, chose to protect my daughter, chose to save 15 children, chose to become something more than what the world expected. This is his legacy, and we're all part of it now. The applause was loud. genuine, the sound of community recognizing one of their own, of society acknowledging that sometimes judgment was wrong, that sometimes the people you feared were the people you needed, that sometimes monsters were myths and heroes were real, and the difference was choice, daily choice, consistent choice, choice that cost something but gave back more. 6 months after the warehouse, the perimeter had rescued 47 children, not all from trafficking, some from abuse, some from neglect, some from situations where system failed, where family destroyed, where innocence was threatened and nobody was listening, nobody was acting, nobody was standing between child and dark. But the Brotherhood was listening, was acting, was standing. 26 men who'd chosen transformation, who'd committed to protection, who'd built network that functioned, that worked, that saved lives. Wire ran the digital operation, monitoring social media, dark web, the places where predators hunted, where children were vulnerable, where rescue was needed before tragedy happened. He'd prevented 12 kidnappings in 6 months, had tracked pedophiles, had provided evidence to law enforcement, had proven that sometimes the best use of hacking skills was protection, was justice, was making sure monsters got caught. Bull had quit riding, had become full-time caregiver. Rowan needed him, needed consistency, needed someone who was always there, always present, always choosing her over everything else. He'd stepped down as VP, had passed the patch, had chosen fatherhood over brotherhood, knowing brotherhood understood, supported, celebrated the choice because that's what family did. Hayes had been promoted. The warehouse bust had made her career, had proven her instincts, had validated the risk she'd taken. Working with outlaws, bending rules, choosing results over regulations. She ran a task force now, dedicated to trafficking, partnered officially with the perimeter. The arrangement unprecedented. The cooperation revolutionary. The results undeniable. 47 children in 6 months. 47 families reunited. 47 futures salvaged. 47 proofs that the system could work if you forced it to. If you made it work. If you refused to accept failure as inevitable. And somewhere in the middle of all that, in the space between rescues and therapy sessions and community center programs, Cole learned to be father. Learned that Finn needed consistency more than perfection, needed presence more than answers, needed someone who didn't give up when things got hard, who didn't leave when leaving was easier, who chose to stay. Every day, through the difficult and the impossible, in the moments when you questioned everything. Learned that being dad meant showing up to school conferences, meant teaching how to ride a motorcycle safely, meant having conversations about trauma and healing, and how some scars were visible and some weren't, but all of them mattered. Meant being patient when patience was hard, meant loving even when love wasn't returned immediately, meant building trust brick by brick until foundation was solid, until home felt real, until family was fact not hope. 1 year after the warehouse, January again, anniversary marked not with ceremony but with gathering. The Perimeter Community Center full, families present, the ones who'd been rescued, the ones who'd been saved, the ones who existed because someone had chosen to care. Greer was there, 7.5 now, thriving, in school, friends, normal life. The kind that proved rescue worked, that healing happened, that childhood survived if you protected it, if you gave it space to grow, if you surrounded it with people who refused to let darkness win. She found Cole in the crowd, ran to him, hugged him with the unself-conscious affection of child who'd learned that some adults were safe, that some promises were kept, that some heroes wore leather instead of capes, and that was okay. That was perfect. That was exactly what the world needed. "I made you something," she said, pulling folded paper from her pocket. "For Father's Day. I know it's not Father's Day yet, but I wanted to give it to you now." The card was handmade. Construction paper, glitter, the kind of craft that took hours. That represented effort. That said, this matters. You matter. This relationship matters. Cole opened it. In hands that had held weapons and built motorcycles and taken bullets trembling slightly. The front showed drawing, more sophisticated than the one from the gas station. But same subject. biker with wings, Cole on his Harley, angel patches, protector, not threat. Inside was written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. To the dad who chose me, thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving everyone. Thank you for being brave. I love you. Greer. Cole's eyes burned. The thing in his chest that had been cracking for a year finally breaking completely. The armor falling away. The protection unnecessary. The wall coming down because Greer was right. She'd seen it first, had drawn it before he knew, had prophesied that he could be more than outlaw, could be father, could be the man who chose children when choosing meant everything. I love you too, kiddo. The words came out rough, choked, but real. More real than anything he'd said in 41 years. Because this love was choice, was action, was showing up every day, was being present through recovery and healing and the long work of proving that rescue was beginning, that protection was permanent, that the perimeter held, would always hold, as long as people chose to stand there. Bryn appeared beside Greer, smiling. 8 months pregnant now, new baby coming, new beginning. Daniel's death had tried to end their family. Vincent had tried to destroy them, but they'd survived, had persisted, had chosen to keep living, keep loving, keep believing that tomorrow could be better than yesterday if you fought for it. Thank you, she said to Cole, for everything, for being in our lives, for showing Greer what good men look like, for proving that asking for help was smart, that trusting the right people was strength, that fathers came in unexpected forms. Cole nodded, unable to speak past the emotion, past the gratitude, past the understanding that he'd been given gift, chance to be better, to do better, to become what 6-year-old girl had drawn, what 14-year-old boy needed, what the world required even if the world would never say thank you, would never acknowledge, would never understand that sometimes salvation came from the people you'd been taught to fear. Finn appeared, 14 and a half now, taller, stronger, smiling more. The anger that had consumed him 6 months ago fading, being replaced by something that looked like peace, like acceptance, like the understanding that family was choice, that belonging was earned through consistency, that love was action repeated daily until it became truth. Hey, Finn said, awkward, teenage, still learning how to express emotion, still figuring out how to be son to father who was learning how to be father to son. They ready for your speech? Cole looked at the gathered crowd, saw families, saw children, saw the rescued and the rescuers, saw Hayes in professional clothes talking to parents, saw Wire demonstrating internet safety to teenagers, saw Bull holding Rowan's hand as she talked to therapist about progress, about setbacks, about the reality that healing wasn't linear, was messy, was ongoing, but was possible. Saw 26 brothers in patches, men who'd chosen transformation, who'd committed to protection, who'd built something that mattered, that functioned, that saved lives, who'd proven that outlaws could become heroes if they chose, if they worked, if they refused to accept that reputation was destiny, that past was future, that broken things couldn't fix other broken things. He walked to the microphone, stood there, looking at faces that trusted him, that believed in him, that saw something in him he was still learning to see in himself. 1 year ago, Cole began, voice steady despite the emotion, despite the weight, despite the understanding that this moment mattered. This gathering proved something. I was at a gas station, filling my bike, planning to ride nowhere, feeling nothing, being the thing society had decided I was, outlaw, criminal, threat. He paused, letting the words settle, letting people remember, letting the contrast become clear. Then a 6-year-old girl ran out of that store, terrified, running toward me, and she said 6 words that changed everything. Please act like you're my dad. She didn't know me, didn't know my history, didn't know anything except that she was scared and I was there, and something in her told her to trust me. Greer was watching, small face serious, understanding that this story was her story, was their story, was the thing that connected them forever. That made them family even though blood didn't, even though logic said biker and 6-year-old girl shouldn't be connected, but were, because connection was choice, because family was action, because love transcended expectation. I could have said no, could have walked away, could have decided it wasn't my problem. But I said yes, and that yes led to the warehouse, led to 15 children rescued, led to Vincent Cross being stopped, led to the perimeter being created, led to 47 children saved in 12 months, led to this, to all of us, to community that formed because someone chose to care. He looked at his brothers, at the 26 who'd stayed, who'd voted for transformation, who'd committed to being more than what they'd been. The Iron Brotherhood used to be outlaws. We broke laws, hurt people, did things we're not proud of, but we chose to change, chose to become protectors, chose to build something that mattered more than reputation, more than tradition, more than the comfort of staying what we'd always been. He looked at the families, at the parents holding children, at the survivors who'd been rescued, at the evidence that choice mattered, that action mattered, that refusing to accept evil as inevitable actually changed things. The perimeter isn't just building, isn't just program. It's promise, promise that every child matters, that every family deserves protection, that society's throwaways are actually treasures, that the people everyone has given up on are exactly the people worth fighting for. He pulled Greer's card from his pocket, held it up. Small piece of construction paper that meant everything. A 7-year-old girl made me this. Calls me the dad who chose her. And she's right. I chose her, chose Finn, chose Rowan, chose every child who needed someone to stand between them and the dark. And that choice, that daily choice to show up, to protect, to care. That's what the perimeter is. That's what we all are. We're the people who choose, who act, who refuse to let innocence be destroyed without fighting. The room was silent, the kind that came when truth was spoken, when words landed, when understanding passed between speaker and listeners that this was more than speech, was commitment, was mission, was the thing that gave meaning to lives that had been searching for meaning. 1 year ago, I was dying, not physically, but inside where it mattered. I was empty, hollow, going through motions without purpose. Then Greer asked me to be her dad, and I learned that being someone's hero means becoming someone's family, means showing up, means keeping promises, means bleeding when necessary and standing when possible and choosing love, even when love costs everything. He looked at Finn, at his son, at the 14-year-old who'd been assigned to him and had become chosen, who'd gone from case file to family, from obligation to love, from foster kid to son. So thank you, Cole said, voice breaking slightly, to Greer for trusting me, to all the children for teaching me what matters, to the families for letting us be part of your lives, to my brothers for choosing transformation, to Hayes for trusting us, to everyone who believed that broken things could fix other broken things, that outlaws could become protectors, that the perimeter holds because we choose to hold it, every day, forever, no matter what. The applause started slow, then built, then became standing ovation. 200 people standing, clapping, acknowledging, celebrating. Not just the rescue, not just the children saved, but the transformation, the choice, the daily commitment to being better, to doing better, to proving that change was possible, that redemption worked, that the worst of us could become the best of us if we chose, if we worked, if we refused to accept that who we'd been determined who we could be. Cole stepped down from the microphone, was immediately surrounded by families thanking him, by children hugging him, by parents crying and saying, "You saved my baby. You saved us. You gave us hope when hope seemed impossible." He took it, all of it, the gratitude and the emotion and the weight of being someone's hero, being someone's father, being someone's proof that good people existed, that rescue was real, that the world had walls built by people who refused to let darkness win. Finn appeared beside him, standing close, the way he did now when crowds felt overwhelming, when emotion was too much, when he needed grounding, needed reminder that family was present, was constant, was the thing that didn't leave when things got hard. "You good?" Finn asked. quiet, the question asking more than the words said. Asking, are you okay? Are we okay? Is this family real? Is this safety permanent? Is this love going to last? Yeah, Cole said, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. Yeah, I'm good. We're good. Finn leaned into him. Small gesture, enormous meaning, the acceptance, the trust, the beginning of believing that maybe this time was different, that maybe this father wouldn't leave, that maybe this family was real, was permanent, was the thing that survived, that endured, that kept promises. The party continued around them, children playing, adults talking, the community forming, the connections being built, the proof that rescue led to healing, that healing led to thriving, that thriving was possible when someone cared enough to make it possible. Bull found Cole in the crowd, Rowan beside him. She looked better, still damaged, still traumatized, but better. Therapy was working. Time was helping. Love was healing. The combination of patience and consistency and refusing to give up was making difference, was proving that even 6 years of hell could be survived, could be overcome, could become past instead of present if you gave it support, if you gave it space, if you gave it the kind of love that said, I'm here every day, no matter what. Brother, Bull said, voice thick, you did this. All of this started with you saying yes, started with you choosing to care, started with you being brave when brave was hard. We did this, Cole corrected. All of us, every brother who chose transformation, every family who trusted us, every child who survived. It's not me, it's us. It's community. It's the perimeter we built together. Bull nodded, understood, because that was truth. Rescue was individual act, but healing was communal, required support, required village, required more than one person, required network of care that caught you when you fell, that held you when you broke, that reminded you that you weren't alone, that you mattered, that your pain was valid and your survival was victory and your healing was possible. The sun was setting, Texas sunset that painted sky orange and red and purple, the kind that made you believe in beauty, in hope, in tomorrow being better than today if you worked for it, if you fought for it, if you refused to let darkness define the landscape. Cole stood outside the community center, watching families leave, watching children wave goodbye, watching the evidence that transformation was real, that the perimeter worked, that 47 children in 1 year was beginning not end, that next year would be more, and the year after, and the year after, because evil didn't rest, so protection couldn't rest, so the work continued, forever. As long as children needed saving, as long as families needed hope, as long as monsters needed stopping. Greer ran back, had forgotten something. Her jacket. She grabbed it from chair, stopped beside Cole, looked up at him with eyes that held trust, that held love, that held the kind of faith that said, you're my hero, you're my family, you're the proof that good people exist. See you next week, she said, for dinner. At our house, you and Finn, Mom's making spaghetti. Wouldn't miss it. Promise, promise. She hugged him one more time, then ran back to her mother, to the car, to the normal life that rescue had made possible, that protection had preserved, that one biker saying yes had salvaged. Finn stood beside Cole, watching the sunset, the quiet moment, the peaceful ending today that celebrated beginning, that honored transformation, that proved redemption was real if you worked for it, if you bled for it, if you chose it every single day despite the pain, despite the voice that said you're not good enough, you're too broken, you're just pretending. Dad, Finn said, testing the word, still getting used to it, still learning that father was choice, was action, was the man who showed up, who kept promises, who chose you when choosing meant everything. Yeah, thanks for choosing me, for not giving up, for being. Finn paused, searching for words, for being what I needed even when I didn't know what I needed. Cole pulled him close. The hug that said, you're mine, you're safe, you're family. You're not going anywhere and neither am I. The embrace that promised permanence, that swore consistency, that proved love was action repeated until it became truth, until it became foundation, until it became the thing you built life on. You chose me too, Cole said. by staying, by trying, by believing that maybe this time would be different. That's brave. That's everything. They stood there, father and son, outlaw and orphan, broken, but healing together, building family from pieces, from choices, from daily commitment to showing up, to being present, to proving that home was people, not place, that family was choice, not blood, that the perimeter held because they chose to hold it together, forever, no matter what. The last car left, the community center quiet, the day ending, but tomorrow coming, with new cases, new children, new families who needed hope, new proof that the work continued, that evil didn't rest so protection couldn't rest, that the perimeter was permanent because people made it permanent, because commitment was daily, because love was action, because being hero meant showing up every day, through the easy and the impossible, through the victories and the defeats, through the moments that broke you and the moments that proved you could be broken and still be whole, could be damaged and still be healer, could be outlaw and still be protector. Cole looked at the perimeter sign, at the building that had been condemned and was now sanctuary, at the space that had been empty and was now full of hope, at the monument to the idea that one person saying yes could change everything, could save 47 lives, could transform club, could prove that redemption was real, that transformation was possible, that the worst of us could become the best of us if we chose, if we worked, if we refused to accept that past-defined future. That reputation was destiny, that broken things stayed broken. 1 year since the gas station, since Greer ran toward him, since she asked him to pretend to be her dad, since pretend became practice, practice became real, real became family, family became mission, mission became the perimeter, the wall between innocence and dark, the promise that every child mattered, the commitment to protecting, to standing, to being the thing that made rescue possible, that made healing real, that made hope more than word, made it action, made it truth. And tomorrow Cole would wake up, would make breakfast for Finn, would ride to the community center, would answer calls from families in crisis, would coordinate with Hayes, would work with his brothers, would show up again, because that's what fathers did, what heroes did, what protectors did, what the perimeter required: daily presence, consistent action, unwavering commitment to being the wall that didn't fall, the promise that didn't break, the safety that persisted even when everything else failed. 1 year since the gas station. 1 year since 6 words changed everything. Please act like you're my dad. 1 year of proving that acting became being, that pretend became real, that broken things fixed other broken things, that outlaws became protectors, that leather and patches could mean safety, that the scariest looking people were sometimes exactly who scared children needed, were sometimes angels wearing wings drawn by 6-year-old girls who saw truth, who saw potential, who saw fathers and strangers, who saw heroes and outcasts, who saw the thing that everyone else missed. That being scary and being safe weren't opposites, were sometimes the same thing, were sometimes exactly what the world needed, even if the world would never admit needing it. The perimeter held, would always hold, as long as people like Cole chose to stand there, as long as brothers like Bull chose protection over tradition, as long as families like Greer's chose trust over fear, as long as children survived and healing happened and rescue led to thriving, as long as one person said yes when they could say no, as long as someone chose care over comfort, love over safety, action over apathy. The perimeter held, and Cole Brennan, former outlaw, current foster father, forever protector, stood at the wall, watching the sunset, holding his son, carrying the weight of 47 rescues and counting, wearing the bracelet stained with his blood, keeping the promises that made life mean something, that made broken bearable, that made tomorrow worth surviving for, that made being hero worth the pain, worth everything. Because at the end, when all the noise faded and the attention died and the story was told, what mattered was simple. Children were safe, families were whole, monsters were stopped, And one biker who'd been dying inside learned how to live outside. Learned that being someone's dad, even starting with pretend, even building from broken, was the thing that saved him, that redeemed him, that transformed him from outlaw into the man with wings. The protector, the father, the hero who kept showing up, who kept the promises, who held the perimeter, always, forever, no matter what. The end was really the beginning of every day after, every choice after, every rescue after, every child saved and family reunited and monster stopped and promise kept. The beginning of Cole being what Greer had drawn, what Finn needed, what the world required. The beginning of the perimeter becoming permanent, becoming legacy, becoming the proof that change was possible, that transformation was real, that redemption worked if you committed, if you worked, if you refused to accept that who you were defined who you could become. The sunset faded, stars appeared, Texas night settling over Austin, over the community center, over the families driving home, over 47 children sleeping safe, over one biker and his son heading home, over the perimeter that held, that would always hold. As long as someone stood there, as long as someone cared, as long as someone chose to be the wall between innocence and dark, the promise that didn't break, the father who showed up, the hero who was really just broken man choosing to be better, choosing every day, forever, no matter what. That was the story, the whole story, the truth about how outlaws became protectors, how one yes became 47 rescues, how pretending to be dad became being dad, how broken things fixed other broken things, how the perimeter held, and that was everything. That was the legacy. That was what mattered. That was the end that was really beginning of every day after, every promise kept, every child saved, every proof that love was action, that family was choice, that redemption was real, that the perimeter held always, forever, because people chose to hold it, because fathers chose to show up, because heroes chose to be brave, because one 6-year-old girl asked one scary biker to pretend, and he said yes, and everything changed, and the world became slightly better. One rescue at a time, one promise at a time, one choice at a time, forever.